All right, hello. Welcome back, guys. I hope all of you guys are doing super amazing and super well. We are back, continuing our little podcast series of horror stories, real life stories, all kinds of stories. I was looking, as always, was looking at the teals. Yeah, Teals. Tales from the Creeps. And I was coming across this one and I was asking you guys on the Discord which one we should read next. And I found one that looks pretty interesting. It's going to be a long read. So I think I'm going to be splitting it up to multiple reads. And we're going to see how well it does. But this is called Ashwood and the creator's name is Thomas underscore Hunt. I'll send a link in the description. He is published. It's under Logan Myers. His Reddit is the Thomas underscore Hunt. I'll be leaving a link in the description for the book on Amazon. Just to support the creators of the people that I'm reading and all the other amazing people. But we're gonna be reading Ashwood. Kind of just don't really want to wait. I've been kind of messing with a couple settings and I just want to start reading right away for you guys. It's gonna be a multi-part series, 5 parts. Each part is lengthy, very, very lengthy. But without further ado, I think we should get started. Ashwood, Act 1, 1987. Alan Russell. We moved around a lot when I was little. As soon as my dad came home from his final deployment in Vietnam, he went back to being a carpenter. He was always working on one project or another, from tool sheds to repairing roofs. He built all the homes we lived in. Little squat one-room houses that weren't much, but were all we needed. We never stayed in one place for too long. Moving forward from mountains to fields to forests, the more we moved, the smaller the houses got. And eventually, I looked forward to the time I'd spent sleeping in the back of our seats of our sedan, stretched out on the warm leather seats. And by the time I was 11, my father had saved up enough money for us to move to the town my mom always talked about, to Ashwood, to a house with real neighbors and running water. My breath fogged up the backseat glass as the town passed by in a blur of dull, muted colors, my eager eyes taking in every detail. The houses here were old, far older than any I'd ever lived in, but they were sturdy and square, with even their sagging porches and crooked shutters hanging in aged uniformity. Mom sat on the passenger seat, uncharacteristically silent, her hands folded in her lap as if she were praying. She'd been different ever since Dad announced that we'd finally saved up enough to move here. She didn't even fight him when he said I could play with my toys in the back or complain about him sneaking me snacks at gas stations. She just stared out the window, her fingers twitching in her lap as her eyes fitted across the street signs. Dad, on the other hand, was beaming. "Oh, you're gonna love it here, Alan," he said for the 100th time. "You have a real room, a real neighborhood, and an Atari." That got my attention. "Really?" Dad laughed. "Swear to God, the family who lived here before left it behind. You'll probably have to clean it up, but..." He shrugged, shooting me a grin in the mirror. "Beats the hell out of sleeping in a car, huh?" At the counter again. Our new house sat at the edge of the cul-de-sac, a faded yellow thing with chipped paint and a long-forgotten garden out front. A huge oak tree stretched over the roof, its gnarled roots breaking through the sidewalk in a way that made me think of grasping fingers. Mom stayed in the car, staring up at the house with a look on her face fixed firmly between desperation and defiance. Dad kissed her cheek, then jerked his head toward the house. "Come on, Alan, let's go see your new room." I guess she wasn't a fan of the yellow. I climbed out after Dad, my sneakers crunching against the gravel as I followed him up the driveway. The first thing I noticed was that the house smelled weird. It was like a mildewy mothballs and old potpourri. I wrinkled my nose at it, but Dad didn't seem to notice. The flowery wallpaper curled up at the edges, revealing walls of the color of spoiled milk. Beneath us, the wooden floors groaned and creaked underfoot, like some animal underneath was waking up and stretching. I walked carefully, my heart pounding in time with each squeak beneath my feet. The hall was long, narrow, and dark, as midnight even, with the weak sunlight seeping through the dirty windows. The light switch left a greasy film on my fingers. When I flicked it on, the light bulb sputtered but once before buzzing weakly. At the end of the hallway, the door to my room hung open, waiting for me to enter and lay claim to my rightful inheritance. Sure enough, the Atari was there, just like Dad had promised, stacked in a box next to a mess of tangled cords. The controllers were sticky to the touch, and when I turned the console over, a brittle centipede husk fell out and landed on my shoe. I shuddered and flicked away, but that feeling didn't leave me, a crawling sensation like something was watching from a dark hallway behind me. I shifted uncomfortably as the dim lights of my room flickered overhead. Across the room, the closet door stood open just an inch. Not wide enough to see inside, but just enough for something to watch me. I shrugged and turned back to my brand new Atari. This place couldn't be that scary if it had video games. The next morning, Mom made me go outside. Go find some kids to play with, she said. Unpacking dishes, stacking them neatly next to the nearly identical ones the old owners had left behind. You can't stay inside all summer. I wandered down the street, kicking at loose rocks and shaving my hands in my pockets to keep them from fidgeting. The neighborhood was nice enough, but it was too quiet. I hoped it wasn't one of those neighborhoods entirely filled with old people, the kind full of wrinkles and faulty memories, with pockets full of expired candy. The lawns were neatly trimmed, with brightly colored bikes tipped over in the soft grass, so there had to be kids somewhere. As I rounded the corner, my worries quickly faded away. Up ahead, there were 4 kids huddled up under a carport, heads bent over something I couldn't see. I hesitated, for only a second before heading over. "Hey," I called, stuffing my nerves down in my gut next to my half-digested breakfast. What are you guys doing?" A boy with shaggy brown hair and a Nintendo t-shirt looked up, eyeing me like I was some sort of alien. "Who are you?" "Alan," I said. "I just moved here." The other kids glanced at each other. I suddenly became very conscious of my torn jeans, my old army jacket, and the streak of dirt smudged on my elbow from where I had tripped on the curb earlier. But before the awkwardness could stretch too far, the tall kid with the strawberry blonde hair and a tattered baseball cap grinned. "You ever play Street Fighter?" I blinked desperately, trying to think of a casual response. Uh-huh, I said, lying through my teeth. He held up a battered cartridge like it was a golden ticket. "Then you're in." And that's how I met Mac, Dawn, Kevin, and Heather. Heather was different because she was a girl, but none of them seemed to care. But she had wild, curly hair as fiery as her temper, and a way of looking at you with her green eyes like she already knew what you were going to say. We played until the sun started to set, crowded around Mac's giant colored TV in his massive bedroom. When I lost my 4th match in a row, Mac nudged me with his foot. "You suck at this." "I do not," I said, cheeks burning. Heather leaned back on her hands, smirking. "Yeah, you do." And to my immense shame, it immediately became 0-5. Dawn snorted, Kevin just grinned, and Mac laughed so hard he nearly choked on his soda. And just like that, I had friends. Mac had everything in his place, even the whole tree house, which wasn't much more than a rickety platform nailed into an oak, but it became our fortress. We spent most of our summer there, playing cards, throwing pebbles at the occasional passing car, and talking about things that we pretended we knew everything about. "You hear about Robert Johnson?" Kevin asked one night, picking at a splinter in the wooden floor. The fireflies flickered around us, casting strange shadows against the wooden slats. The crickets had gone quiet, and humid wind rustled through the leaves, like a gray hibernating beast shifting into its den. Max snorted. "Who?" "Some old blues guy," Kevin said. "My dad told me about him. Said he wasn't always good at a guitar, but then one day out of nowhere, he was the best there was." Heather raised her eyebrow. "So..." Kevin leaned forward. "So the story goes, he went down to the crossroads at midnight, and some guy was waiting there. Super tall, dressed super nice. He took his guitar and tuned it. They gave it back to him. And from then on, Johnson could play better than anyone." Don, who had been lying on the back, staring at the ceiling, made a face. "That's it? A guy helped him tune his guitar?" Kevin scowled. "No, dumbass. He made a deal with Old Scratch, sold his soul to the devil so he could make rock. That's the story." Matt kicked at the floorboards lazily. "I thought Bon Jovi made rock." Kevin ignored him. "My dad said Johnson's music was weird, like the way he played, even though the musicians couldn't figure it out. He just laughed if people asked him how he got so good." And they scoffed. "That's so dumb. He probably just practiced." Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his sleeping bag. "Yeah, maybe." Somewhere far off, a low hum filled the air. It was so faint I almost didn't notice. Like the sound of your ears make when you go too high in the mountains, a deep buzzing pressure just beneath your skull, like your ears just before they pop. No one else seemed to notice. I shivered and turned my gaze back to the woods. The darkness beyond the treehouse stretched out in an unending expanse, interrupted only by a brief twinkling of brown lights upon the mountains. I remember having the strangest feeling that something was watching me. Summer in Ashwood smelled like fresh-cut grass and hot pavement, like cherry popsicles melting on your fingers and the fake chemical bite of chlorine at the town pool. It was kind of the summer that belonged in a movie. The days seemed to stretch on forever, the nights buzzed with fireflies, and everything was filled with an effortless warmth, like something slipping into a warm bath. We had our routines. Morning were for baseball, afternoons for swimming, and evenings for whatever dumb plan Mac came up with that day. If we weren't at the pool, we were racing our bikes down Miller Hills, trying to hit every bump without flying over the handlebars. If we weren't doing that, we were loitering outside the gas station, trying to distract old man Carson, while Kelvin pilfered the beard cabinet. And if we weren't doing that, well, then we were probably getting into some sort of trouble. All right, listen up, losers. Max slapped his glove against his palm and as he scanned our ragtag excuse for a baseball team. We got a big game today. Heather squinted at him. Against who? Mac grinned. Ourselves, duh. She rolled her eyes, so it's not that big of a game. It's always a big game, Don said, stretching out his arms like he was warming up for major leagues. Mac ignored both of them. Kevin, you're batting first. Alan, you're shortstop. Heather, you're... He squinted at her. What's the thing you suck at? Heather swung her glove at his head. Catching. Mac ducked, grinning. Right, so you'll be in the outfield. Heather just flipped him off. We played at the old baseball field behind the school. The grass was patchy, the bases were just sun-bleached squares of plastic. The home plate had a crack running right down the middle. It was a crappy, unkept mess, but it was ours. Kevin stepped into the bat first, knocking the end of the wooden bat against the dirt. If I hit a home run, you all have to buy me a soda. Max snorted, if you hit a home run, I'll buy you a car. Kevin narrowed his eyes. You don't even have soda money. Exactly. Kevin swung and whiffed it completely. Matt cackled. Holy shit, that was pathetic. Heather whistled. Swing and a miss, baby. Kevin scowled. I tripped. Maybe you should try tying your shoelaces, Don muttered. By the time we called it quits, we were sweaty, grass-stained, and covered in dirt. Heather had a scrape on her knee from taking a controlled fall into first. Mac had taken a fastball to the stomach after Kevin got too ambitious. He was still complaining about it when we left the field. You beamed me, Mac winced, rubbing his ribs. Kevin shrugged. You were in the way. I was on first. How was I in the way? Alright, maybe I misjudged the angle. Mac reached over and smacked him with his glove, catching Kevin off guard, who gasped like a fish as a resonating smack echoed through the crisp air. Heather laughed so hard she almost tripped over the first base again. After baseball, the pool was necessary. Ashwood only had one, and it was kind of a sleepy little place where the lifeguards were always half asleep. The concession stand only sold off-brand soda, and the diving board creaked like it was one cannonball away from snapping in half. We loved it. We changed into the locker rooms, the concrete floor cold against our bare feet, and raced each other out of the water. Mac was always the first one in. He ran full speed and cannonballed into the deep end, barely surfacing before yelling, "Belly flop contest!" Kevin and Don immediately joined in. Heather and I, meanwhile, stood at the edge of the pool, watching them launch themselves into the water like idiots. Heather squinted at them. They're gonna crack their ribs one day. I smirked, hopefully today. She snorted. So, you can take over as our glorious leader? I shrugged modestly. Somebody has to. She nudged me. I think you're a terrible leader. Before I could respond, she shoved me in the pool. I barely had time to take a breath before I hit the water, the shock of the cold sending a jolt through my whole body. I kicked back to the surface, gasping for warm air. Heather was grinning down at me, hands on her hips. You're the worst. She laughed. You were taking too long. I swam to the edge of the pool and held onto the ledge. Heather's curls were frizzing up from the humidity, the sunlight turning them deep, fiery red, 1,000 flickering flames curling around her face. I was used to her just being Heather, but something about the way the light hit her in that moment made my stomach do something weird. So I splashed her in the face. She shrieked, stumbling back. You ass! Whoops, I said, grinning. Heather narrowed her eyes. You know what? No mercy. She jumped in after me and dunked me under the water. I didn't even try to fight it. Honestly, my favorite thing about living in Ashwood was the bike rides. In all the places I had lived before, riding my bike was a lonely affair. Just a way to get from one empty lot to another, past houses too far apart to feel like a real neighborhood. Here, it was an adventure. Heather led the way, her legs pumping furiously as she cut down a narrow dirt path behind the school. Don and Kevin were close behind her, shouting at each other who would get there first, and Mac rode at my side, occasionally bumping his shoulder into mine just to throw me off balance. You ever been this way before? He asked. I shook my head and slightly out of breath. Nope. Good, Mac grinned. Hope you don't get scared easy. That set off a very loud argument between Kevin and Don over who was the bravest of the group as we rode into a particularly gnarled part of the bike path where I had to dodge several erratic branches. I swear, you guys argue over everything, Heather groaned. Next, you'll be debating who has the best cereal. Kevin pointed at her. Cinnamon Toast Crunch. End of discussion. We rode hard for about 20 minutes, eventually skipping to a stop near the edge of the clearing where the woods thickened. Just beyond it, hidden past the groves of all the tall pines, was a huge campsite with cabins, a mess hall, and a big outdoor fire pit with logs stacked in deep rows nearby. What's that place? I all struck. Mac followed my gaze. Oh, that's Focinian Grove. The what? They pulled out a water bottle, taking a sip before answering. It's some club for families that have been here for a long time, or for important people. They have like a summer camp out here every year. Some of the older kids work there, but they don't hire kids our age. Interesting, I squinted, mulling this over. Can we go play over there? Don shrugged. We probably shouldn't. There's usually nobody there, but they get weird about it. That night we camped out in Mac's treehouse again. It was a warm summer night, filled with the sound of distant crickets and drifting fireflies that blinked in and out of the dark like tiny ghosts. Far off in the mountains, I could see brown lights glowing amongst the trees. Kevin had brought a bag of marshmallows, which we tried to roast over a candle Heather had smuggled from her house. I gave us like 5 minutes before Max sets the treehouse on fire, Don said, popping a slightly burned marshmallow in his mouth. Max scowled. I know how to handle a fire, Don. I don't know, man, Kevin said, nudging a melted glob of marshmallow off his shorts. You did try to microwave a Pop-Tart in the foil once. That was an experiment. Heather smirked. Yeah, an experiment in how you burned down your kitchen. Mac threw a marshmallow at her. We talked until we got too tired to keep our eyes open, our voices growing slowly and slurred, and our warm laughter slowing into the soft sounds of silent slumber. By the time school rolled around, I had firmly settled into life here in Ashwood. The school itself was a squat brick building filled with linoleum and the smell of old books. It was smaller than all the other schools I had been to, and everybody knew each other. In Ashwood, some of the teachers called roll by first names only, because in a town this small, there was always just one Heather, one Mac, and one Don. Unfortunately, even though I was the only Alan, I was the new kid. Alan Russell, Mr. Corbin called me on the first name. A few heads turned towards me as I raised my hand. Heather grinned at my anxiousness, leaning over and whispering, "What's your middle name?" I sighed. "It's Andrew." She smirked. "Alan Andrew Russell? Yeah, that tracks. I raised an eyebrow. Tracks how?" She shrugged. It just fits. Like a kid who always does his homework and never jaywalks. I scoffed. "I jaywalk all the time." Heather grinned. "Sure you do, Alan Andrew." We had always had lunch together. The 5 of us crammed in the same creaky plastic table, trading increasingly questionable cafeteria food. I'm making fun of Mac because his mom packed him turkey sandwiches every single day. "You're gonna turn into a turkey," Don said, through a mouthful of Doritos. Mac rolled his eyes. "Oh no, then I'll have to stop going to school and live in the woods forever." Kevin pointed at him with a chicken nugget. "Might improve your grades." That made us all laugh, even Mac. Heather nudged me. "What'd you bring?" A pulled out my peanut butter sandwich and a bag of pretzels. Nothing special. Heather studied it, then reached over and took a pretzel without asking. She did that a lot. I let her. Kevin Sherman. There were 3 types of kids at this Ashwood junior high. Kids who took school seriously, nerds. Kids who pretended to take school seriously so their parents wouldn't kill them, spineless nerds. And legends. I was a legend. Well, not officially. No one had put up a plaque or anything, but I figured it was only a matter of time I had the highest score on the Pac-Man machine at Carson's gas station. I could make an entire paper football field goal from across the lunchroom, verified by a witness, and I was the undisputed king of sneaking contraband snacks into class. The only ruffle was that Mac also thought he was a legend, which was patently ridiculous, because no one could have 2 legends in one friend group. There were rules. Heather thought I was a moron. She wasn't completely wrong, exactly, but she didn't have to say it out loud all the time. Don was alright. He had a moral compass, which made some things harder. And Alan had potential, but he was too nice to ever reach full legend status. We all sat together in every class we could. Well, except for Heather, because for some reason the teachers never put her next to us. It was like they knew she was our ringleader, even if she pretended otherwise. There were other kids in the school, obviously. You couldn't just have us, but then it'd be weird, like one of those sitcoms where the same 5 people are the only people in the whole town. Some of them were alright. There was Brandon Collins, who could burp the entire alphabet and smell like he lived in a basement. And Jenny Parsons, who once broke a kid's nose in 4th grade and now held a weird sort of power over the entire school. Nick Miller, who brought raw hot dogs for lunch every day and ate them like it was a normal thing to do. That's my kind of guy right there. Glizzy, all Frank No Ocean. And then there were kids like Trevor Holloway, who only talked about his dad's car, or Laura Greenfield, who was so rich that she had 2 Laserdisc players, and when one got scratched, she just threw it away. Psychotic behavior, really. School wasn't bad exactly, but it was the same thing every day. You woke up, dragged yourself to class, and sat through lectures that only pretended to be interesting. Our history teacher, Mr. Corbin, had been working at Ashwood Junior High since before our parents had gone there. He had acted like that gave him some kind of godly authority. Mr. Sherman, he said one afternoon, and I was folding the world's greatest paper football. Would you like to tell the class what year of the Declaration of Independence was signed? I stalled. Back from his desk, mouthed 1776 at me. I narrowed my eyes. Was he messing with me? I glanced at Heather, who had her head down like she wanted no part in this. Alan had a pained look on his face, like he was debating whether or not to help me. Don looked mildly amused, which meant he definitely wasn't going to help. I took a shot. 1756. Mr. Corbin sighed the deepest sigh known to man. Mac jumped his head onto his desk with a thud. Mr. Corbin didn't even get mad, which somehow made it worse. He would just looked at me in a way that only a middle-aged man reconsidering his life choices could. After school, we'd bike over to Carson's Gas and Convenience, which was the place to be if you had $2 and no parental supervision. It was a rundown old gas station that had probably peaked in the mid-60s, evident by the outdated memorabilia that lined the walls and aisles and even the pumps. The most disturbing part of it was the countless missing posters that lined one wall, a collection of children about our age that seemed to grow larger and larger every year. Carson Wells, the owner, was about 90 years old and only half paid attention to what any of us were doing. The police had come in to try and get him to take down the disturbing posters, but he pulled his usual "I'm an old man" act and shoot them off. Heather and I had a routine. I would distract Carson with important questions. Carson, if I had to steal a candy bar, but then put it back later, is this still a crime? Heather would grab as much gum and candy as she could. Then we'd make a big deal about buying a single pack of baseball cards once we were safely outside. We'd enjoy our hard-earned spoils. Alan never took anything, but he also never stopped us. Don sometimes took a soda, but only if we peer pressured him into it. And Matt got banned from the store for trying to sneak out with a whole jar of pickles. Ugh. Why pickles? The best thing about fall in Ashwood was that nobody actually watched the junior high football games. Sure, there were parents in the bleachers, but they were only paying attention when their kid was on the field. That left the rest of us to run wild. We spent most of the games under the bleachers, training packs of Big League Chew, making bets on things like how many hot dogs Kenneth Connolly could eat before throwing up. The answer was 5. It was kind of fall night where the air was cool enough to keep mosquitoes away, but not cool enough for us to need a jacket. The metal framework of the bleachers rattled and groaned every time the crowd shifted above us. The game was happening somewhere in the distance, but none of us were paying attention. Mac was flicking bottle caps at Don, who was blocking them with his forearm with some kind of battle-hardened knight. Heather sat cross-legged on the dirt, tearing into a pack of red vines with the grace of a starving raccoon. And Alan was staring up through the gaps in the bleachers, like he was actually thinking about climbing them. I watched him tilt his head, checking the beams like he was mapping a route. You're not seriously about to do that, I said. Alan blinked. What? Heather followed my gaze and raising up an eyebrow. Oh my god, are you planning to climb the bleachers? Alan shrugged. I mean, theoretically, no. Matt grinned. I think he should do it. Heather tossed the red vine at him. You just want to see him eat it. Matt grinned wider. Obviously. Alan sighed. I wasn't actually going to climb anything. Heather smirked. Sure. I wasn't. Don crossed his arms. But you thought about it. Alan hesitated. And that was all the proof that we needed. I whistled. That's some real reckless behavior, man. Truthfully shameful. Mac added. Heather shook her head and clicking her tongue. And here, I thought you were the responsible one. Alan groaned, rubbing his face. I am responsible. Max snorted. Yeah, responsible for bad ideas. Alan muttered something under his breath, but I caught the corner of a reluctant smile above us. The crowd roared. Someone must have scored, but none of us moved to look. Instead, we stayed where we were, comfortable in our private booth, where the air smelled like dirt and candy, and the metal beams cast weird shadows across the grass. Max started flicking bottle caps at me. Heather nibbled on another string of licorice, and Alan kept looking up at the bleachers, not climbing them, just thinking about it. Mac Peterson. We're gonna die, Alan said matter-of-factly, like we were already ghosts, doomed to haunt the banks of the Skull Creek for all of eternity. Kevin adjusted his grip on the rope, only if you let go at the wrong time. This is exactly what I'm worried about. Heather sat cross-legged on the rock, peeling the label off of a Coke bottle. If Alan won't go, I'll go next. Kevin smirked. See? Heather isn't scared. Heather shrugged. I mean, I am, but if I die, at least I'll look cool doing it. I rolled my eyes. You guys are idiots. Kevin grinned. Obviously. Then without a word, he launched himself off the bank. The rope stretched, held, then swung him straight over the water. For half a second, he actually looked graceful. And then he let go and immediately belly flopped into the creek. A loud smack resonated across the water. Don winced. Ooh, that had to have hurt. Alan groaned. I'm not going after him. Kevin's head popped up a second later, gasping for air. That was awesome! Heaven snorted. You look like you just lost a fight with a beaver. Kevin flipped her off, half laughing, half choking. Someone else go. I grabbed the rope. Fine. Watch a pro. The thing about rope swings is that you have to time it perfectly. Too soon, you'll hit the water at a weird angle. Too late, you'll crash right into the far bank. I obviously had perfect timing. I swung out, let go at the right second, and hit the water clean, slicing through the surface like a human torpedo. When I surfaced, Heather nodded approvingly. Alan sighed. I guess I'll go next. His swing was fine. His landing, not so much. After a few hours of splashing around, seeing who could spike their wet hair into the crazy shapes, Heather won, and grabbing each other's ankles under the water, we decided to get out, giggling at how prudently our hands were. I suddenly became aware of how quiet it was. Now that our splashing and laughing no longer filled the air, a sudden prickling sensation raising the hairs on the back of my neck for just a moment. I could have sworn I saw a silhouette in the trees, but Kevin snapped me out of my overly hydrated sputter. Mac, Kevin said, grabbing me by the shoulders and shaking. What? I said, scrunching up my face and keep pushing him away. You forgot to do the induction ceremony, Kevin said, grinning with the eagerness of the cruel aristocrat excited to watch an execution. Unfortunately, he was right. For the next few months that we'd known Alan, I had completely forgotten about the tunnel. The tunnel sat at the far edge of town, just past one of the many fracking sites that littered our mountain range. A gaping maw of rusted steel, half sunk into the earth, leading down to something too dark to see the end of. Most people said it was just a sewer line that got cut off when the new construction started, but Kenneth Connolly said it was haunted by miners who never made it out, and Brandon Collins swore there was a thing in there, something with no eyes and too many teeth. All we knew was this: if you wanted to be part of our group, you had to walk all the way to the end, touch the old support beam, and come back. No exceptions. Alan had been part of the group for months, but not officially. Not until tonight. Alright, Alan, Kevin said, japing over his shoulder like an old sage, old mentor, about to impart some great wisdom. You've been with us long enough. It's time for us to make it official. Alan looked between us, brow furrowed in confusion. Official? I smiled like a wolf before a flock of sheep. The induction ceremony. With straight face, I gestured dramatically towards the rusted metal entrance of the tunnel, half buried in the ground just past the fracking site, where its wide mouth yawned open like a passage to hell, a one-way ticket to damnation. You walk to the end of the tunnel, touch the last support beam, and come back, I explained, barely holding back a grin. That's it? Alan asked, his brow furrowed, still wary. Don nodded. Yeah, that's it. Unless you believe the stories? Alan narrowed his eyes. What stories? Kevin leaned in, lowering his voice. Some people say it's an old mining tunnel. Others say it was built for fracking, but abandoned when they started hearing, he wiggled his fingers for dramatic effect, strange noises. No one knows how far they really go. Some say if you go deep enough, you never come back. Alan rolled his eyes. Oh, please. If it's so easy to do it, Don said, crossing his arms. Alan hesitated. Then that's when I knew we had him. I don't know, guys. Heather said, arms crossed. Maybe we should. Kevin groaned. Oh my God, Heather, you'll be fine. Alan gazed at the entrance, staring into the dark tunnel like he was already regretting every decision that had brought him here. Heather shifted uncomfortably. I just don't think we have to make him do it. He's already part of the group. Kevin clenched his chest in mock offense. Heather, are you questioning the sacred traditions of the induction ceremony? I'm questioning whatever we should shove our friend in an actual hole in the ground, she shot back. Alan sighed, glancing at Heather. It's fine, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. Don clapped a hand at his shoulder. It's tradition, man. Heather wasn't buying it. It's stupid. Kevin shot her a look. You did it. Heather huffed. Yeah, when I was 10 and didn't have enough brain cells to know better. Alan ran a hand through his hair. Just go in, touch the thing, and come back. That's it? I nodded. That's it. The mouth of the tunnel yawned open in front of him. Alan took a deep breath, then he stepped inside the tunnel, swallowing whole. We stood outside the entrance, watching as the silhouette shrank into the darkness. The deeper he went, the more the shadows consumed him, until only the faint shuffling of his footsteps echoed back. Heather shifted beside me nervously. This is a bad idea. Relax, Kevin said. We all did it, and we're fine. Heather didn't look convinced, chewing a stray curl. Kevin rocked back on his heels. Think he'll run back screaming? Don shrugged. I hope not. I bet 2 sodas on him making it. Heather wasn't laughing. Something in her posture was off. Not just impatient, but tense. I nudged her. You good? She didn't answer right away, nervously rubbing her hands. Then so quietly, I almost didn't hear it, she muttered. It's too quiet. I frowned. Yeah, no shit, we're in the middle of nowhere. No, she said sharper this time. Listen. I did, and the wind had stopped, but no sound of faraway distant cars. No chirping cicadas, no fleeting whistles of birds. There was just silence. Then a sound. Not Alan's footsteps, but something else. A low thrumming hum reverberated distantly through the ground, like the earth itself was breathing deep within its core. The tunnel vibrated faintly, as if the hum was coming from inside it. Up ahead, Alan stopped walking, his frail form swallowed by the darkness. Guys? His voice was faint, filled with a twinge of fear. The hum deepened. Heather tensed. Alan, come back! The ground shifted, shaking the earth around us, almost knocking us off our feet. Heather's eyes went wide. Alan! She set off as a sprint, making for the mouth of the tunnel. Alan turned back towards us, hesitating for only a second before breaking into a mad dash for the surface. His hurried footsteps echoed unevenly as he doubled back towards us. It was as if he was stumbling. As the hum grew louder, the pitch of it deepened. The air tightened, pressing against my ears like we were too deep underwater. I felt it in my ribs, vibrating in my bones, a groan coming from below us, like something ancient waking up. Alan was almost at the end when I felt the pressure low in my skull. The air has just dropped out of the tunnel. The entrance was too far. The darkness behind Alan was rapidly approaching. Alan! Heather's voice echoed throughout the tunnel, muted and hollow. Alan stumbled, narrowly avoiding bashing his head on the metal-grated floor. Heather caught him, her hands firmly grasping his shirt and yanking him forward. Dragging him out of the tunnel, the second they broke into the surface, the hum stopped. The wind returned, and so did the distant sounds of birds, of crickets, of nature, of the world. Alan collapsed on the dirt, gasping for air. The rest of us just stared. Don blinked. What the hell was that, man? Alan looked at the tunnel, then at us, then at Heather. She was out of breath, her face as red as her hair, her shaking hand still firmly gripping the back of Alan's shirt. Heather swallowed once, managing to catch her breath, then stood up. Brushing the dirt off of her hands, she muttered, "That was a stupid idea." And then, because Kevin had zero self-preservation instincts, he started clapping. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "Alan Russell is officially one of us. One of us. One of us. One of..." Heather punched him in his arm. "Seriously? What?" Kevin grinned. "He made it, didn't he?" Alan, still catching his breath, ran a hand through his hair. "That was awful. Awful. Yet completed." I nudged his shoulder. "Welcome to the club, man." Alan huffed a laugh. "I hate you guys." Heather eyed him. "Did you hear the humming noise?" Alan hesitated, then shook his head. I don't know. It's probably just the fracking." Heather glanced at the tunnel. The entrance was still as dark and as forbidding as ever. I threw an arm around Alan's shoulder, steering him back towards our bikes. "All right, our work here is done. Let's get back before Kevin starts inducting us into more ceremonies." Kevin wagged a finger. "Actually, there's a secondary financial initiation." "Nope." Down grabbed him by the collar, dragging him away. "You lost your privileges, and you owe me 2 sodas, which Alan will not be paying for." Alan was still shaking his head as we hopped on our bikes and rode off towards my house, leaving the tunnel far behind us, silently waiting as if I listened carefully just beneath the rustling leaves, a sound of our tires against the road. I thought I could still hear it, a hum, deep and patient. I shook off the feeling and pedaled harder to catch up to the rest of my friends. When we reached my house, the 5 of us had made a beeline past my parents, pounding up the stairs like a horde of noisy, messy elephants. My house was the only place in Ashwood that had a Super NES, the premier state-of-the-art game console, sleek and gray, like something out of a futuristic movie. The first time I saw it sitting in my room, I felt like I was standing on the precipice of something holy. The rest of my friends had old Commodore 64 systems and maybe a battered Atari if they were lucky. But the SNES, that was something else. I knew it. For all my younger audience, if you guys don't know what that is, Carter, can you please put a picture up of everything that I've said? Please and thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, all you youngings. All you young people. I sat on my bed and leaned against the wall, a grin plastered across my face. All right, who's ready to get their ass handed to them? Kevin grabbed the controller. Big words for someone who still cries when he loses a Monopoly. I scowled. "That was one time, and you cheated." "I did not cheat." "You stole from the bank, Kevin." Kevin waved a dismissive hand. "Listen, all finances are a gray area." I ignored him, grabbing the third controller before Alan could. Official member or not, I wasn't about to let the new guy get a head start in Mario Kart. I booted up the game, the familiar jingle filling the room as the opening screen popped open. Alan sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the menu like it was written in hieroglyphics. So, how do you play? Heather, sitting beside him, smirked. You drive. Alan shot her a look. I figured that much. You also lose. I added. A lot. Kevin cackled. He's right. We don't go easy in this house. Alan narrowed his eyes. What if I'm like naturally gifted? I barked out a laugh. Natural talent won't save you from the wrath of my red shells. Alan rolled his shoulders like an athlete prepared for a championship game. All right, bring it on. 20 minutes later, he was screaming, "Who keeps hitting me?" Heather leaned back against my bed, sipping her soda. That'd be me. Stop! Kevin was dying of laughter. This kid thinks he escaped the green shell. I had first place. Had. Past tense. I just smirked. Welcome to the real world, Russell. Nothing is fair. Alan clenched his jaw. Okay. New game, new race. I got this. Heather grinned. That's the spirit. Then she hit him with another shell. Alan's soul left his body. What do you guys think? Kind of leave it down in the comments. What do you think about the story so far? I think that was a good tense moment in that tunnel. But yeah. All right. Now, from the perspective of Heather Robinson, Mac fell in love in under 5 minutes. It was disgusting. Who's that? He craning his head as he stared across the lunchroom like he'd seen a ghost or a celebrity or a ghost celebrity. Kevin followed his gaze mid-chew. New kid? New girl, Dawn corrected him. She's in my homeroom. Morgan something. Mac blinked. Morgan. He said it slowly, almost reverently. Kevin snorted. Jesus, dude, you sound like a Disney prince. Alan, sitting next to me, smirked, thinking he's gonna go full Romeo. I laughed. He doesn't even have the brain cells to go half Romeo. Mac ignored us. I still looked on the girl across the room. She had dark hair that was messy in a way that looked effortlessly instead of lazy. She was wearing a Def Leppard shirt, sitting alone at the end of the table, completely absorbed in her book. I could already see the gears turning in Mac's head. Dawn leaned back. You should go talk to her. Mac scoffed. What? No, that's desperate. Kevin grinned. So I was staring at her like you're in a Hallmark movie. Mac scowled, grabbed his tray, and stood. I was gonna eat lunch with you guys, but I suddenly remember I hate all of you. And with that, he walked off. We watched him cross the cafeteria, watched him hesitate, moving his weight back and forth, rocking the heels of his feet, building up the courage before finally sitting down. Morgan glanced up at him and said something too far for any of us to hear. Mac laughed, not his usual obnoxious laugh, a real one. Kevin nudged me. Tempak says he embarrassed himself in the next 2 minutes. I barely heard him. Something about the whole thing made my stomach turn like a washing machine in a hurricane. A premonition of something coming. See, the thing about being me is that I notice things. It's not on purpose. It's just how my brain works. I see things other people don't, and sometimes things I don't want to. Like how Mac has suddenly stopped making fun of me for liking books but only because now Morgan liked books. Like how Don always had those premature dark circles under his eyes because he had like a million younger siblings and a mom who worked way too much. Like how Kevin acted like when he had the confidence of a coked up game show host, but some days his jokes were just a little too forced. Like how Alan was Alan, and I really didn't think about what that meant. One day after school on the walk, I finally came to head for Kevin. My parents were off at couples counseling, so there was nobody waiting for me at the house. I was lagging behind, tired, picking up the frame strap of my backpack. Kevin slowed down next to me. Hey. I glanced at him, raising up an eyebrow. Hey. He was quiet for a second. I frowned. Are you okay? He kicked a rock in the street. I studied him for a moment at the way he nervously twisted the hem of his shirt between his fingers. Kevin never talked about serious things. He was always just the one with a quick joke that would make anyone laugh, no matter how bad their day was. But right now, he just looked lost. I don't know, he muttered. Sometimes I just feel like he stopped shaking his head. Forget it. I stopped walking. Hey. He turned towards me, his eye flickering back and forth like an old television changing channels. I crossed my arms. You can tell me stuff, you know. Kevin grinned. It didn't even reach his eyes. I do tell you stuff, like how Mac is definitely gonna propose. I roll my eyes. Kevin. He hesitated, drawing air in his lungs as if he were preparing for an Arctic plunge. It's just my dad. Kevin never talked about his dad. I don't know. He rubbed the back of his neck. He's all I got. Sometimes I feel like I could set myself on fire and he'd only notice if the house burned down too. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, he's an idiot. Kevin started, yeah. As for once, he didn't have a joke. As annoying as it can sometimes be, noticing things really does come in handy every once in a while, even if it takes a moment to realize what's really going on. But sometimes I wonder if it would be better if I never knew at all. The first time I saw him, I thought he was someone's dad. We were at recess sitting under a big oak tree by the fence, trading gummy worms and watching Kevin try to throw rocks at basketball hoops. Alan was sitting next to me, squinting up at the sky, filled with obnoxious mottled gray birds that swarmed our playground. You ever wonder what it like to be a bird, he asked. I snorted, like, specifically a pigeon. Alan grinned, of course. I rolled my eyes, tossing a gummy worm at his face. You're so weird. He caught it and popped it in his mouth. Something about the way he did it so casually. I don't know. I sat there for a moment, watching the wind ruffle his sandy hair. Then my gaze moved upwards, and I saw him, standing by the fence. A man anywhere from his late 30s to mid 40s watching us. No, not watching us. Watching Alan. His head tilting gently aside from side to side. He wasn't just like a teacher. He wasn't standing with any of the parents. He was just there. Standing rigidly, patiently. I felt my stomach twist. A pang of fear and panic tearing through me like a bullet. Instantaneous and deadly. I nudged Alan. Hey. He turned towards me, a question on his lips. I nodded towards the fence. Do you know that guy? Alan glanced over there. The man was gone, the street empty, with no trace of shadow he could cast, no sign that he had ever been there. Alan frowned. Who? I swallowed my throat, suddenly very dry. Nothing, I muttered, setting down a bag of gummy worms, but it wasn't nothing. The way that man had looked at him, like he was starving, I knew that something was very wrong. Oh, fuck no. I really hope this isn't going where I think it's going. Oh, fuck no. Oh, hell no. Okay. Now from the perspective of Mac Peterson. You see, we weren't rich. Not like Trevor Holloway's family, with their vacation homes, private planes. Not like the families who owned the town. The ones whose last names were etched in the very bones of Ashwood. Kowalski, Ives, Quinton. But we had more than most. I didn't think much about it until I did. Until I sat down at Alan's kitchen table, eating boxed macaroni and hot dogs while his dad counted crumpled bills under dim yellow light. Until I spent the night at Heather's house and saw half-finished repairs, the walls that had been stripped bare, but never repainted, the roof that always seemed to need fixing. Until I realized that my house, with its 3 stories, finished basement, with its leather furniture and fully stocked fridge, wasn't normal. My dad didn't wear tailored suits or drive a Cadillac, didn't spend his afternoons in a golf club shaking hands with men who controlled the world from behind their polished mahogany desks. But he wasn't like Alan's dad either. He didn't come home with splinters in his hands and sawdust in his hair, didn't smell like a wood stain and sweat, and didn't spend long nights at the bar when work dried up and the money ran out. My father's hands were soft and smooth, the hands of a man who sat at a desk all day, sifting through numbers and paperwork, speaking in terms of liabilities and assets, things that made other men's eyes gaze over when he talked about them. He ran a construction company, overseeing the account or finance wing, or something equally mind-numbing. I never really asked because it never really mattered. I never had to wonder if the lights would stay on, if there would be food in the fridge, or if my parents would ever look at me with the same tight-lipped worry I saw in Alan's mom's and Heather's dad. The paychecks came on time, the workers got paid, and that was all that mattered. My mother liked to do everything she could to keep it that way. She liked to throw parties, not the kind with plastic cups and cheap beer, where All the kids blared music through busted speakers and took long drags from stolen cigarettes. No, my mother's parties were curated. She said it was a good for her dad's career to that it was important to be seen. The man didn't get promoted just by being good at his job. He got promoted by knowing the right people. Mayor Kowalski and the school superintendent, the owners of half the businesses in the valley, they all passed through our house at some point, sipping whiskey in the living room, talking in low voices while the stereo played jazz records my mom didn't actually like but thought made it us sound cultured. She moved to the rooms with a glass of wine in hand, laughed at just the right amount of airy, smile-filled with the right amount of warmth, playing the part of a woman who loved entertaining, who loved people, who thrived on hosting hospitality. But I saw the way she looked at them. When thought no one was watching, the way she would roll her eyes at their jokes, the way her smile would slip for just 1 second before she pinned it back in place. Heather hated those nights. She called my mom a fake step-forward wife. Maybe she wasn't wrong, but I didn't mind them. I like seeing my dad laugh, even if it was mostly for show. I like the comfort of knowing that when I went to bed, the world outside my window wasn't waiting to fall apart. Alright, we're going back to Alan Russell. One of my earliest memories is of my front door. It was mahogany, a firm, sturdy door, shaven smooth by hours of hard work. My father had made it himself, pouring his sweat and lifeblood into the walls of our home. I remember the way it shook, rattled, completely at odds with the calm, brisk knock that had preceded it. I remember my father's confused shuffle as he walked to the front door, pausing a moment to unlatch all the deadbolts before swinging it open to our mysterious guest. The man wasn't tall by any means, about average height, well-dressed, his tweed suit and maroon tie making him look more like a fatherly history professor than the standard door-to-door salesman. He tipped his hat towards the spot where I had watched from beneath the stairs, a weary grin spreading across his face, too white for the rest of his features. His handsome face stretched unnaturally, revealing a large set of white teeth. He said something to my father, but his voice was wrong. It had an accent I couldn't place. Old, like someone from the cartoons my dad used to put on for me. I turned back to my Lincoln logs, carefully placing a log upon the precarious frame from a cabin. I wanted to build a second story. I wanted to live in a big house, one with a school, water, and then come from the creek. As I reached for another handful of logs, my mother's voice rose in recognition. Loud. Too loud. I covered my ears and crawled out from under the stairs, moving forward towards the kitchen. I opened the pantry door and gazed up longingly at the racks of preserves, my eyes settling on a mason jar of strawberry jam. Glancing around fruiterily, I don't know how to say that word, sorry guys. I gripped the lowest shelf and started climbing, pulling myself up, my feet scrambling for a hold. The voices around the pantry grew sharper, but I ignored them. I was almost there. My fingers wrapped around the jar, scooting it towards me inch by inch. The lid was tight, but I wrestled it off, the luscious smell of sugar filling my nose. My fingers sank into the sticky jam. I shoved as much as I could into my mouth, figuring I only had a few moments before my dad found me and all the fun would be over. The pantry door creaked open. I turned, my mouth still full, my fingers still faced with sticky strawberry preserves. My parents stood there, as disheveled and tired as I had ever seen them. My father's shirt was torn from collar to waist, his face smudged with black handprints, his hair sticking up on one side. My mother's hair was stringy and matted, her face pale as a morning cup of milk. I thought they looked funny. I told them as much. They didn't say anything. I figured they might have been really angry about the jam until my dad finally spoke, his voice as tired as he looked. Son, we're moving again. I hadn't thought much about it until something weird happened one morning on the way to school. Morgan's dad dropped her off at school. I hadn't paid much attention to him before. He drove a pickup truck, worked late, and always seemed busy. But that morning, as Morgan climbed out of the passenger seat, her father sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His fingers were twitching, his face covered in an unkempt, subtle stubble of a man who looked with a terrible work-life balance, and his mouth moved like he was whispering something to himself. Then, as if sensing my gaze, he turned sharply and locked eyes with me. I froze. For a second, we looked at each other. Then Morgan slammed the door shut, and the spell broke. Her dad pulled away from the curb, drove off without another glance. Morgan didn't seem to notice anything wrong, but I did. That same feeling crept into my chest, the one that felt all those years ago, watching my father unlatch the deadbolts. The feeling that something was coming. So I got suspicious during first period when Prince Howell knocked on the classroom door, stepped inside, and announced that a deputy would be conducting a safety inspection. It seemed innocuous enough, but I watched him through the window of my classroom door just in case. He checked the locks on the classroom doors, peered inside the supply closets, paced the cafeteria like he was looking for something. Or someone. When his eyes flicked towards the window, I snapped my head down to my desk. It was then, looking down at my desk, littered with science assignments that I could not be less interested in, that I made up my mind. My dad was in the kitchen table when I asked. And had been gnawing at me ever since I saw the way Morgan's dad looked at me, white-knuckling the steering wheel like something bad had already happened. I decided I would need to be very clever about how I asked, so I carefully planned how I'd make a casual comment that perfectly led into the real reason for the conversation. Hey Dad, people ever go missing around here? My father didn't look up right away. He was working through a pile of bills, the edge of the cigarette burned low in the ashtray. What? In town, have there been missing people? My dad frowned, setting his pen down. He shot a quick glance at my mother, who was washing dishes against the sink, then looked back at me. Where's this coming from? I shrugged. I hesitated. Someone at school said something about there being kids who left and never came back. My dad exhaled through his nose and reached for cigarettes. Small town talks. So it's not true? My father was quiet for a moment, rolling the cigarette between his fingers before finally looking at me. People move away all the time. They leave in the middle of the night, maybe don't tell their friends, maybe don't tell anyone at all. He shrugged. Hell, if I left my hometown when I was 18 and never went back, it happens. I wouldn't lose sleep over it. I nodded, but something about the way my father said it just didn't sit right with me. You're distracted, Heather said. I blinked. What? We were sitting in the library, supposedly working on a history project. Mac and Morgan were whispering to each other across the table, and Kevin was pretending to read while actually doodling in the margins of his notebook. Heather was watching me. I cleared my throat. I'm not distracted. I was supposed to be studying, but Heather was too close. We were sharing a textbook, head bent over the same page. Her curls brushed up against my arm every time she shifted. I was suddenly very aware of how good she smelled. She turned a page, her shoulder knocking into mine. Alan, are you even reading? I blinked. Huh? She groaned. God, you're hopeless. Before I could argue, she leaned in closer, lowering her voice. If I get an A on this test and you don't, I'm never letting you live it down. I smirked. You say that like I ever get A's. Heather rolled her eyes. Then, before I knew what was happening, she reached up and ruffled my hair. I went stiff. She pulled away, grinning. Come on, pay attention. I stared at her, my face burning with the heat of 1,000 suns. Heather closed the massive textbook, sending dust particles flying towards Kevin, who wrinkled his nose a few times before sneezing. The loud sound snapped me out of my stutter. She scooted her chair over towards the softly humming microfilm machine, scrolling through something. Old articles from 10, 20, even 30 years ago flickered across the screen. Heather turned towards me, her bright green eyes meeting mine. I stared back, not unlike the deer in headlights. Do you remember when we were talking about those missing posters? Heather asked. I nodded, as I thought back to Carson's convenience store, to the rumpled leaflets haphazardly nailed onto the side of the wall. All right, Heather murmured. I pulled everything I could find on those missing person cases. I followed suit, moving my chair over and leaning in, scanning the headlines as she flipped through them. Local girl missing since June. Family of missing teenager moves out of Ashwood. Ashwood PD. No foul play suspected. Walker's family distraught, Whitney missing, another runaway, 12-year-old gone without a trace. Every case was the same. A kid disappears, their parents report it, only for the town to shrug it off like a stray flea. No foul play, I muttered. Scanning the articles, they always say that. Heather nodded, fingers tapping against the desk, and no details. No one ever says where they were last seen. What were they wearing? Anything. Just that they're missing. Heather turned towards me, eye sharp. You think someone's covering it up? He hesitated. I don't know. But something fell off. Heather scrolled further. The dates stretched back decades, the pattern repeating every summer like a cycle. The hungering beast of abandonment claiming its long list of victims. And that's when she froze. I followed her gaze to the screen. In grainy black and white a photograph of a group of teenagers, maybe 16, 17. One of them was irrefutably, unmistakably Governor Quinton, noticeably missing his trademark gray curly hair and reddened nose. Shit, Heather breathed. He looks so young, I said, peering closer at the clean-shaven teenager on the flickering monitor. I didn't recognize any of the other people in the photo with him. A dark-haired girl with a smile that could melt glaciers, and a thin red-haired boy in a tight-fitting jacket. Who do you think disappeared? I asked, looking back at Heather. My money's on her, Heather said, pointing out one long finger at the brunette girl. Why her? I asked, puzzled. Heather looked at me, puzzled. Haven't you noticed? They're nearly all girls. I glanced back into the list of articles, scanning the names. Huh, it's weird. That night I had trouble sleeping. My mind was far from Heather's budding conspiracies. Instead, I kept thinking about what Heather had done before that. About the way the corners of her mouth curled, the way her eyes glimmered with an irresistible mirth, when I accidentally performed my best impression of a beat. I stared at the ceiling, my heart beat loud in my ears. I leaned over, peering out of my window, looking at the dark sky, my eyes struggling to adjust to the dark. Out at the edge of my vision was a shape. I could barely make it out, like an oddly shaped tree. As my sleep-addled eyes adjusted, I could make it out more clearly. A man, standing motionless in a field, silently watching, waiting for a glimpse of my small, pale face in the window. I jumped backward in shock, quickly pressing my face up against the glass to get a better view, but nothing was there. The field was empty. That night I made the decision I was going to start carrying a pocket knife. I found my dad's old knife in the junk drawer, a small folding blade. A little rusty, but still sharp. It felt good in my hand. Something solid that I could hold on to. I tucked it into my pocket, looked at myself in the mirror. 12-year-old Alan Russell. Small, skinny, but not helpless. I didn't know what was coming, but I wasn't going to be scared. Not again. Dawn Spooner. Some people have a knack for making themselves the center of attention. Mac, for example, couldn't go a full day without a big plan or scheme that usually ended with him limping home covered in dirt. Kevin had a way of making everything into a joke, loud, fast-talking, and impossible to ignore. Heather could hold the room's attention without even trying. And Alan didn't always try, but people always noticed him anyway. Me? I was the guy holding everything together. I had to be. With my 3 younger brothers at home, I was the one making sure the cereal didn't run out, that my mom didn't forget to pick up my brothers from daycare after working a double shift, and that no one left their socks in the sink again. Don't ask. The kind of thing doesn't just switch off when you leave the house. So when Kevin looked like he was struggling, I was the one who let him copy off my homework, even though I knew he'd get half of it wrong anyway. When Mac's new thing with Morgan started actually getting serious, I kept my mouth shut, even though part of me wanted me to tell him he was an idiot. And when Heather genuinely was worried for the first time in years, I noticed and I listened. It was 3 days after she saw the man named Alan. We were walking from school, just me, Heather, Alan, Kevin, since Mac had started leaving early to walk Morgan home, setting her like a lovesick golden retriever. Heather had been quiet all day. She barely said anything at lunch, even when Kevin was in a rare form, going on about he was going to grow up to be a highly respected businessman who wore suits and said things like, let's circle back to that. Yeah, I'm looking at Alan. I knew she was building up to something. Finally, after we had passed Miller's Hill, she stopped walking. Alan looked back. What's up? Heather hesitated for a second, then turned to me. Back me up on this, she said. I frowned. On what? She took a deep breath. There's something wrong with this town. We glanced at each other, taken aback but totally not surprised. Heather had always been the most inquisitive among us, always questioning the rules of life as she encountered them. We never paid much mind. That's just how she was. But now, the look in her eyes was something different altogether, something I'd never seen before, her pale green eyes brimming with passionate fervor. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you've been reading way too many of your creepy books. Heather ignored him. A few days ago, I saw a guy watching Alan at school. Alan's face scrunched up. Wait, what? I don't know who he was. He wasn't a teacher. He wasn't a parent. He was just there. She shifted her weight, scuffing her knockoff chucks across the pavement. And then he wasn't. Alan frowned. Are you sure you weren't imagining this? Heather shot him a look and knew that she was telling the truth. Kevin sighed. Even if there was some guy, maybe he just... No, Heather interrupted me. She turned back to me. Dawn, she said. You get it, right? You've seen all those creepy-ass posters at Carson's. They can't be normal. I don't think they have that many missing kids in other towns. At least they don't in any of the movies I've seen. I hesitated. Then I nodded. Because the truth was, I had thought about it. Maybe not in the same way Heather did, but I noticed certain things too. The way my mom never talked about growing up here, no matter how much my brothers asked. The way the street lights flickered all at once, like they were connected to some invisible signal. The way the air seemed to hum sometimes, even when it was dead quiet. Heather exhaled. Thank you. She turned towards Alan, her eyes wide with excitement of spilled secrets. I've been looking into that girl, the one from the photo with Governor Quinton. That got his attention. Alan shifted, clearly uncomfortable, rubbing the back of his neck. You mean the missing girl? Kevin blinked. Wait, who? I found an old photograph of Governor Quinton at the library. Heather explained. There was a girl standing next to him, a little older than us. I thought it was weird. She wasn't labeled or anything, so I tried to figure out who she was. Heather paused. Well, I found her on Carson's poster wall. Turns out her name is LaRowan Grayson, and she went missing a long time ago. Kevin scoffed. Okay, but people go missing all the time here. It sucks, but that doesn't mean... Heather ignored him, her voice steady. She was Quentin's high school girlfriend, and the last place she was seen was at the Phoenician Grove. A heavy silence settled between us. Heather pressed on. She worked there. That's why she was there that night. Quentin was staying at the Grove when it happened. He was there when she disappeared. A strange weight settled in my chest. Kevin crossed his arms. So, what does that mean? Heather glanced down at her sneakers, then back up at us. I don't know yet, but I don't think it's a coincidence. I swallowed. Heather wasn't done. It's not just that. Mac's dog, Biscuit, he hates the Grove. He won't go anywhere near it. You know how much he growls if you even start to walk towards the trees. Kevin scoffed, but it was weaker this time. So what? He probably just doesn't like the woods. Heather shook her head. No, it's not the woods. It's that place. She looked at each of us in her turn, her voice quiet but firm. I don't think Lenore Grayson ran away. I don't think whatever happened to her was an accident. Alan rubbed the back of his neck, visibly uneasy. Heather, that was a long time ago. Heather didn't waver, her face as stubborn and indignant as the orange curls that framed it. Then why is her face still on the board at Carson's? Kevin let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing his temples. We're gonna end up in a padded cell, aren't we? Heather ignored him and turned back to me. What do you think, Dawn? I sucked in a long breath and released it in the warm afternoon air. I thought about my brothers, about my mom coming home exhausted every night, about the feeling I sometimes got that I was standing on the edge of something big, an unseen crevasse that challenged me to step into its maw and be devoured. I'm gonna talk to Mac. I cornered him at the gas station later that night. He was at the slushy machine, mixing cherry and blue raspberry like a man who had no respect for tradition. So, I began, 1,000 questions on my lips. He sighed. Heather got to you, huh? I frowned, caught off guard. You believe it, don't you? Max started his drink, staring at the counter. I believe she believes it. I studied him. You notice things too, huh? Mac hesitated. Yeah. he quietly admitted, started raising an eyebrow expectantly. So? So what? So why are you acting like this isn't a big deal? Max scoffed. Because everything is a big deal to Heather, and she's gonna end up in a padded cell at this rate. I crossed my arms. And you don't want to know the truth? Mac took a deep breath, rubbing his temples. Then finally he muttered, I don't know if I do. I wasn't expecting that. Mac didn't say anything else. He just grabbed his slushie off the counter and left. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of Heather's theories, not because of Mac was scared, because of that feeling that gripped the base of my stomach and blossomed into an azalea of anxiety in the center of my chest. I lay awake, listening to the sounds of my house, my brother snoring, the fridge humming, the faint creak of the wind against the windows. Beneath all of that, I heard that low hum, like the sound of the earth makes before a storm. I sat up reluctantly, leaving the warmth of my bedsheets. Cautiously and slowly, I walked across the dark room, stepping on a minimal amount of Legos on the way over. I looked out the window. The street was empty, the cracked asphalt illuminated by a single streetlight, but I felt it, a presence, waiting for me. Alright, back to Heather. I didn't bring my friends home if I could help it. Not because my parents were bad people, but because they were loud. My father had been a Navy SEAL before he was anything else. Before he was a husband, before he was a father, before he was a man who sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a pistol within reach. And he never let me forget it. Heather, you gotta be tougher than the rest. Heather, you gotta stand your ground. Heather, you never let a man make you feel small. I used to think he was talking about boys, but now I'm not so sure. My dad woke up at 5 a.m. every morning, even when he didn't have to. He cleaned his guns twice a month, even when they weren't dirty. He talked about the war like it was still happening, as if it had settled in his bones and refused to leave. He kept the TV on the news, kept the police scanner running in the background, and listened to the world like it was a ticking bomb just waiting to go off. Because in my mind, it was. Because in his mind, it was, and he wanted to be ready. My mother loved my father. That was much was obvious, but she didn't take his bullshit. She would roll her eyes when he went off on one of his back in my day rants, when he talked about how the world was going to hell in a handbasket, how the government was corrupt, how the only things keeping us all from total collapse was the thin thread of men who still knew how to fight. She called him paranoid, she called him dramatic, but she never contradicted him in front of me. Not once. Because deep down, I think she was afraid he might be right. I saw it in her face when she thought I wasn't looking, the tension in her shoulders whenever the phone rang late at night, the way she would stare out the window watching the road, waiting, as if she was expecting something, that one day my father's fears wouldn't just be theories, that one day the world outside would be something she could roll her eyes at anymore. Back to Dawn. The thing about living in a town like Ashwood is nothing ever happens. Sure, sometimes weird stuff goes wrong, but nothing that would ever make it past our local paper. This was different. Governor William Quinton was here. Now, I don't pay much attention to politics, mostly because it's boring, and I'd rather spend my time doing literally anything else. But even I knew who Quinton is. Everyone did. He was the governor of Arkansas, the kind of guy who was on the TV a lot, shaking hands, giving speeches, and always looking like he was about to sell you a truck. He was one of the politicians who talked big, about jobs, about opportunity, about making Arkansas better, and apparently, he was coming to Ashwood to talk about fracking. He'd been around in Ashwood for years. Everyone knew the Quinton family had helped found the town in the old days, even back before my parents had been born. Even if you hadn't seen his face in the papers, you'd seen the founder's plaque in the center of town. Our town was proud of its governor, and discussing Quinton's endeavors had become part of life here. Like church on Sundays, or football on Fridays. But Quinton wasn't here to talk about what his family had already done. He was here because he wanted to do something new, and they had pulled out all of the stops for him. Mom had been talking about it for weeks. Now that the day had finally come, she was buzzing with excitement, herding me and my brothers, Nathan, Oliver, and little Sam out of the door, like we were late for church. "Come on, Donnie," she called, adjusting Sam on her hip, and she locked the door behind us. "You don't want to miss this." I wasn't so sure. It was humid out. The sun was bearing down on me, The last thing I wanted was to be packed in a crowd while some politician gave me a speech. But Mom was thrilled, and so was about everyone else in the town. When we got to the town square, I was shocked at how many people had shown up. It felt like the whole town had gathered: families, shop owners, even the old folks who barely left their porches. The diner had set up a table with lemonade. Kids were weaving through the crowd, and there's this electric feeling in the air, like something super important was about to happen. Mom found a good spot near the front. I stood beside her, balancing Oliver on my hip, while she had Sam, Nathan, who was 7 and took himself way too seriously, stood next to us with his arms crossed, wearing a frown like an article of clothing aimed at the courthouse steps. Governor William Quinton walked onto the stage like he owned the place, as if he had been born and raised in Ashwood soil. His silver curls caught the sunlight, and his suit was crisp and perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. He smiled, his big, pale, open smile, the kind that would make people feel like they already knew him. He approached the podium slowly, letting the crowd settle, his hands placed firmly on either side as he looked out at us, like we were old friends catching up from years past. "You know," he began, his voice smooth and easy, "when I come to my place in Ashwood, I don't feel like a visitor." A few people chuckled and nodded. "This town, these streets, these people, you are my home. Being here reminds me of when I was just a kid, wandering around barefoot, getting in trouble, causing my mom all kinds of grief." He grinned and shook his head like he was remembering some long ago mischief. "But the thing is about this town like this," he continued, his voice dipping just slightly, taking a more serious tone, "is that the world tends to forget about us." A murmur ran through the crowd. "The big cities get the attention, the money, the new businesses, while places like Ashwood, we work hard. We do our jobs nobody else wants to do, and we do it well." He gestured broadly, as if inviting us to look around at our town, to recognize the truth in what he was saying. "And I tell you, every time I come down here for my stay at that beautiful grove, I'm reminded that y'all are the backbone of the state. Y'all make this place what it is." Mom clapped, and so did a few others. Quentin gave a slow nod, as if he were deeply motivated. "And I think it's time we gave something back." Their pause built. "People like the sound of that. I'm proud to announce," Quentin continued, spreading his hands like he was bestowing a blessing, "that we will be expanding our fracking operations right here in Ashwood. More jobs, more opportunity, more prosperity. And with that, we're building a better, bigger Ashwood." A cheer rippled through the crowd. Nathan tugged at my sleeve. "What's fracking?" I shrugged. "I think it's how they make babies." Mom squeezed my shoulder, beaming. "This is going to be good for the town, Donnie." Quentin raised his hands, calming the crowd just enough. "Now, I know what some of y'all might be thinking," he said, lowering his voice like he was letting us in on a secret. "Change can be scary. Nobody likes to wake up and feel like the world is shifting under their feet." He leaned forward, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "But I promise you this ain't just some business decision made in the office somewhere. This is for you. This is for your families. This is for your futures. This is going to make our town the kind of place people want to come to. The Quintons founded Ashwood. The Quintons will always take care of Ashwood." Another round of applause echoed through the crowd, accompanied by an occasional cheerer who, louder now than it was before. I slapped away Nathan's sticky little hand, looking up at Mom to see that she was clapping harder than ever. "And the best part," he let the moment hang, grinning, "we're starting right now." He turned to a man in a dark suit standing near the courthouse steps. The man nodded, lifting a walkie-talkie to his mouth. A low, mechanical groan rumbled from the mountains. The ground beneath my feet vibrated. It started slow, like the hum of a train in the distance, but then it grew, steadily pulsing through the dirt and through my bones. A few people turned around, glancing up nervously towards the mountain peaks. The drilling had begun. We are going to Mac. The governor's house was even bigger than what I thought it would be. I hadn't seen it before, of course. Anyone in Ashwood who's ever driven out past the old magnolia groves has seen the Quinton estate, sitting up on a hill like something out of a history book. But seeing it from the car window and being here, stepping on the long, curved driveway where the lands flickered and the grass looked too perfect to be real, were two different things. Dad got out first, adjusting his shirt like he was making it sure it fit right. He was wearing a nice button-up, not a suit, but nicer than what he usually wore to work. Mom had a dark green dress, her hair pinned up like she meant business. Me? I had khakis and a polo that itched. My mom had spruced me up, scrubbing my face with every trace of mud. Of the mud fight I had with Alan was wiped clean. She ironed my shirt twice, telling me I had to look good for the governor. Dad let out a shaky breath and turned to me. Best behavior, alright? I nodded, swallowing against the tight collar of my shirt. Yes, sir. The house was huge. Up close, the columns looked even taller, stretching up in the evening sky, and the front door was big enough that it felt like stepping into the courthouse or a museum. But before we reached the steps, the big front door swung open, and there he was, Governor William Quinton, his gray curls neatly brushed back, clad in a blazer and a tie and a smile. Well, now look at this, he said, grinning like we were old friends. The Petersons in the flesh. His voice was big, the kind that you wouldn't want to smile even if you weren't sure why. He came down the steps fast, like he wasn't the governor for the whole state, but just some regular guy who had been waiting all day for us to show up. Dad shook his hand, gripping it firmly. Governor Quinton clapped him on the shoulder, like they had known each other for years. You must be Mac, the governor said, looking right at me, his voice warm and welcoming. I straightened up, suddenly feeling like I was supposed to stand at attention or something. Yes, sir. He chuckled. Good handshake. I hesitated for a half second before sticking out my hand. He took it, his grip firm, but not too tight, like a dad at a barbecue. His fingers wrapped around mine, soft and moist. He said, not letting go right away. Strong grip, that's good. Important in a boy. He let go, clapping me lightly on the shoulder. Come on inside now, before Elaine gets on me about keeping guests waiting. I stepped past him. I felt his hand linger at my back, just hovering before it drifted away. The inside of the house could only be described as expensive. Every surface polished until it was shown. It smelled like the air itself had been scrubbed clean. The fire crackled on the big stone hearth, making the whole place feel warm and cozy despite its size. Miss Quinton appeared, moving like a shadow and slipping in from the hallway so smoothly that for the second I didn't hear her at all. William, she said softly, don't keep them standing in the entryway. She stepped forward, her smile smaller than the governor's but still warm, like a polite kind you see in the old photographs. She was short and thin, with gray and blonde hair neatly framing her face. Her dark blue dress was simple but elegant, with tiny pearl earrings that caught the light. Miss Peterson, she said, shaking my mom's hand. It's so lovely to finally meet you. Thank you for having us, Mom replied, her voice polite but steady, the way she talked when she was trying to make a good impression. Nonsense, Miss Quinton said with a soft laugh. We've been meaning to do this for ages. She turned back towards the foyer. Come and eat. The dining room was huge. A long wooden table stretched through the middle, glowing under a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a castle. Silverware gleamed beside plates that had little gold edges. In the center of the table, steaming dishes sat, waiting, piled high with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans that actually looked good, and fresh bread that smelled fantastic. Mac, the governor said as we sat down, you look like a boy who appreciates a good meal. He let out a deep belly laugh. Now that's what I like to hear. Dinner started. The governor talked the whole time, leaning forward with his elbows on the table like he was letting us know in some big secret. He told me about growing up in Arkansas, about sneaking into his dad's office as a kid, but the time he tried to ride a bull ended up with a bruised tailbone that still ached when the weather gets cold. Did you really? I asked, wide-eyed. Cross my heart, he said, grinning as he lifted his wine glass. And that, my friend, is why you should always respect a bull. I laughed, and so did Dad. It was easy talking to him. Easy in a way that didn't make me feel like we were at some fancy dinner with the most powerful man in the state, but like we were just sitting around on a family table, eating good food and telling stories. At some point, though, the conversation shifted. You know, the governor said, spearing a piece of chicken with his fork. Your dad's done some fine work in this town, Mac. I nodded. He works real hard. Governor Quinton's smile widened, but his sharp blue eyes stayed locked on Dad. That's why I wanted to talk to him tonight, he said, setting his fork down. Big changes are coming to Ashwood. Big opportunities. Dad's fork paused just for a second. I've heard. I'm sure you have. The governor leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. And, well, I want to make sure those opportunities went to the right people. Silence settled over the table. Miss Quinton dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, her expression indecipherable as the paintings on the wall. I didn't understand all of what was happening, not fully, but I knew something was being said. Something important. Dad nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Governor. Call me Will, he corrected, smiling again, and I appreciate you. Oh, God. I wonder what the fuck's gonna happen. His pale eyes flicked back to me just for a second. I suddenly wish I hadn't spoke so much. The moment passed, burning low like the candles that lined the walls of the room. The governor clapped his hands together. Now then, he said, looking around. It was ready for dessert. The tension melted into laughter, and just like that, dinner went on. The food, the stories, the warmth of the fire in the big stone hearth made it easy to forget that this was anything other than a friendly meal. But even as the night stretched on, even as the governor laugh filled the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been decided. I just didn't know what. Alright, back to Alan. The sheriff station was a squat, unassuming building at the edge of town, tucked between the hardware store and a rundown diner that smelled like burnt coffee and fried eggs. Even long after its closed its doors, the place wasn't anything fancy, just a handful of offices, a couple of holding cells, a break room stocked with stale donuts that had been sitting there since before I was born. But to us, it was the one part of town where we were absolutely safe. The place where nothing bad could happen. Sheriff Wilkes saw to that. Well, hell, if it ain't my favorite troublemakers, Wilkes boomed as he spilled through the door, his deep voice rolling like thunder. I grinned. We're not in trouble. Mac beside me elbowed my ribs. Not yet. Wilkes chuckled, shaking his head as he leaned back in his chair, his uniform wrinkled but well kept, the gold badge on his chest polished to a mere sheen. He looked every bit the small-town lawman, broadened shoulders, silvered hair, with a thick mustache curling over his upper lip, like something out of an old western. The kind of man who would sit you down and tell you a story and make you feel like you were the most important kid in the world. Well, if you're not in trouble, we'll bring you to my humble establishment. Heather stepped forward, tossing a manila envelope on his desk. We found something. Wilkes raised an eyebrow, glancing down at the envelope like it might bite him. Should I be concerned? Max shrugged. Probably. Wilkes leaned forward, flipping open the envelope, his expression shifting as he thumbed down through the faded photographs and printed out articles, littered with old faces and old names of people who had once belonged to Ashwood. Max sat on the edge of the desk, swinging his legs. We were just curious, you know? How come people go missing so often here? Wilkes let out a long, slow sigh, rubbing his hand over his mustache. Y'all been playing detective again? Heather crossed her arms firmly. Is it true? Wilkes hesitated, and for the first time he looked his age. Looked tired, the weight of his job slowly showing painfully on his face. People go missing everywhere, he said finally. Life is cruel sometimes. It's not always fair. It's not always kind. And no matter how much we want things to make sense, sometimes they just don't. He tapped one of the newspaper clippings, a young man's face staring up at him, smiling like he had his whole life ahead of him. This boy here, Mark Lannister. He nodded, eyes locked on the photograph. I knew his folks, Wilkes murmured. Good people, hardworking. They didn't deserve what happened to them. What did happen? Wilkes sighed, leaning back in his chair, his distant gaze, as if he was seeing it all happen again. He hesitated for a moment longer, deciding if we were old enough to know. Mark went hiking with his uncle. They left at dawn as they were going to fish by the river, but only his uncle came back. Heather's brow furrowed. What'd he say? Happened. Wilkes didn't answer right away. He reached for a thick, leather-bound Bible that sat on his desk, its spine worn with years of use, and flipped it openly, running a thumb over the yellowed pages. He did that sometimes whenever he was thinking. His uncle swore up and down that Mark was behind him, right up until the moment he wasn't. No screams, no struggle, just gone. A chill settled in the air. I swallowed, my throat dry as a bone. That doesn't make sense, Mac muttered. No, son, it doesn't. Wilkes shut the Bible, tapping his fingers against the cover. Have you guys ever read the Book of Job? We exchanged glances. Isn't that the depressing one, Mac asked. Wilkes let out a booming laugh, shaking his head. Boy, they're all depressing if you read them right. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk, his expression turning serious. Job was a good man, a righteous man, but Satan came before the Lord and said, Job is only faithful because his life is easy. Take that away and he'll curse your name. So God let Satan test him. He took his land, his family, his health, left him with nothing. Wilkes paused, his fingers drumming against the desk. But Job didn't break. He endured. Silence hung the room. I'm sure you kids have wondered why bad things happen to good people. Heather shifted uncomfortably. Sometimes. Wilkes nodded. Well, I don't claim to know God's plan, but I do know this. He gestured the old newspaper clippings and the old faces. The world is full of trials. People go missing, bad men do bad things. But if your faith is strong, if your heart is true, then no darkness, no evil, no suffering can take away the light inside of you. There was something comforting in the way that he said it. A sensation that warmed the soul. Mac frowned, but what about the people who never came back? Wilkes sighed. He stood, moving to the window, staring out of town, at the forest that lay beyond it. I reckon there's always going to be a place where the light don't reach, he murmured. There was a long silence, then he turned back to us, that familiar kindness returning to his face. You hear about the lion? Mac pricked up. What lion? Wilkes grinned and tilted his head back. Samson's. Heather groaned. We already know that one. He raised a thick, bushy eyebrow. Oh yeah? She sighed. His parents wouldn't let him marry the girl he wanted, so he went stomping off into the woods, saw a lion, and then killed it with his bare hands. Mac finished, eyes wide. Wilkes chuckled, nodding. That's right. Tore the thing apart like a wet paper bag. I swallowed. You know why I like this story? Heather tilted her head. Because it's about being strong, Mac guessed. Wilkes smiled. Because it's about a man doing what needs to be done. He gave us a warm, fatherly smile, stroking his mustache. Let me tell you about this time Samson killed 1,000 men with a donkey's jawbone. Heather frowned. That's in the Bible? Wilkes ground, tickled pink by her question. Oh, they don't talk about it much in the church. Not the fun stuff. He leaned forward, bracing his arms against the desk. But it's there, plain as day. The office was quiet as he told the story. The afternoon sun bleeding through the blinds, slanting across his desk in gold ribbons as dust swirled in the light. He told us how Samson was captured, blinded, bound in iron chains, how he had waited, biding his time, how God returned his strength in final moments, and he brought the whole temple down upon their heads. Mac was leaning forward, eyes widened, while Heather's lips pressed down to the thin line. I swallowed. So, Samson was a hero? Wilkes nodded. A warrior. A man who understood. He tapped his fingers against the desk thoughtfully. You see, they like to talk about the gentleman, the peaceful ones, the ones who turn the other cheek. But sometimes, son, his eyes flicked to me, sometimes a man's got to pick up the jawbone. Okay, I'm kind of liking this guy. Slowly, he reached down to his belt, sighing his fingers and pulling out a peppermint popping in his mouth, instantly reminding me of the first time I'd met him. He had always had peppermints in his pocket. It was the first thing I noticed about him as a kid. The sharp smell of mint every time he leaned down to ruffle my hair, the way his coat pockets rattled softly when he walked. It was late autumn when I found him, sitting outside of the station, rocking slowly in a creaky old wooden chair, his boots propped up on the railing. A Bible sat open in his lap. The pages yellowed at the edges, full of little scribbles and notes. He glanced up when he saw me. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he said, tipping his hat back. Is it better something, kid? I hesitated. No. He smiled. Then what brings you by? I scuffed my shoe against the wood, debating whether or not to ask. Do you believe in monsters? Sheriff Wilkes blinked. Then he let out a deep, rolling laugh. Monsters? He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Son, you best take a seat if we're talking about some monsters. I sat. He pulled out a peppermint and unwrapped it slowly, rolling it between his fingers. Now, that's a mighty big question for a little fellow like you. You worried about something? I hesitated. There's a lot of kids going missing, I admit it. I see all their posters every time I go to Carson's, and some of the other kids at school talk about it too. Wilkes nodded thoughtfully. That's true, he said. That's a terrible thing. He popped the peppermint into his mouth, chewing slowly. But monsters? No, son. Ain't no monsters out there. I found. How do you know? He chuckled. Because I've been sheriff in this town longer than you've been breathing. And if there were monsters, I'd reckon I'd seen one by now. I didn't say anything. I didn't believe him. Not really. Sheriff Wilkes sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Tell you what, he said. I mean, I believe in monsters, but I do believe in something worse. I looked up. His eyes were steady. Man. A chill ran through me. Now, don't you go worrying yourself, he added quickly. Most folks in this world are good, but some men, Alan, some men are rotten. They get greed in their bellies and sin in their hearts, and they'll do whatever it takes to get what they want. He tapped the open Bible in his lap. That's why we got this, he said. The good Lord gave us a guide, a way to stay right. You read this book, son, and you'll never have to fear what's lurking out there. I stared down at the book pages, the unusual shaped words swimming before my eyes, flowing across the page like a babbling brook. That looks confusing, I said, squinting to make out the words. Sheriff chuckled, a deep laugh that originated in his lower abdomen and lifted upward, the edges of his mustache twitching with mirth. Well, you got plenty of time for all that. Now, go run off. Play with your friends. I'll make sure to keep an eye out for those monsters. I got up from the chair, catching the peppermint candy that he tossed me, and waved goodbye. Oh, my cat's being cute. Mac Peterson. The first time I ever took Morgan on a real date, we ended up at the bowling alley. Not because I was trying to be original or thoughtful, no. The plan had been to go to the Dairy Shack and split a strawberry shake like they did in movies, but my brilliant plan fell apart the second I realized I had exactly $3.17 in my pocket. Not even enough for fries. So in the moment of pure desperation, I blurted out, "Want to go bowling?" And somehow she smiled and said, "Yeah, that sounds fun." And that's how I learned that Morgan Wright was the coolest girl on the planet. Our local bowling alley hadn't changed since the 70s, with perpetually sticky floors, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a jukebox in the corner that only played old country songs. But when Morgan stepped inside, she made it look like it was exactly where we were supposed to be. She had this way of belonging, no matter where she went. Like she could walk into the most rundown, broken place in the world and somehow make it feel alive again. Her ponytail bounced as she moved, her hands tucked into her sleeves of her hoodie, the tips of her fingers peeking out as she leaned on the counter to talk to the guy handling our rental shoes. And me? I was an absolute mess in a pair of bowling shoes, 2 sizes too big, trying not to trip over my feet as I followed her into our lane. Morgan stretched her arms over her head, grinning as she glanced at me. "All right," she said, rolling her shoulders. "What's the bet?" I blinked. Bet? She smirked. "We're not just playing, are we?" I rubbed the back of my neck, scrambling for something too cool to say. "I mean, you could just admit that I'm gonna win." Morgan snorted, a sharp, amused sound. "Mac, you're cute and all, but I've seen you throw a basketball." I've groaned, pressing a hand to my chest like she personally wounded me. That was one time. She tilted her head. "It was last week, and we don't talk about it," I muttered quickly. Morgan crossed her arms, tapping a finger against her elbow as she considered me. "So," she said, "steaks?" I thought for a second, then snapped my fingers. "Loser buys ice cream." Morgan narrowed her eyes. "You don't have money for ice cream." "Loser steals ice cream?" She laughed then, an actual full-body laugh, her head tilting back, her hands gripping her stomach. Just like that, the rest of the world faded away. It didn't matter that the lane smelled like old socks or the neon lights made my skin look weirdly green. It didn't matter that my hands were sweating or that I had no idea what I was doing, because she was here. Because Morgan Wright was laughing like that. And God, if I had bottled that sound, I would have carried it with me forever. Morgan took the first turn. She lifted the ball with effortless confidence, stepped up to the lane, and sent it sailing down the polished wood with the precision of a trained assassin. It curved slightly at last second, avoiding the gutters with ease, and slammed into the pins with a sharp, decisive crack. A strike. I stared, my mouth firmly agape. She turned to me, smiling like it was nothing. "Your turn." I blinked. What the hell was that? She shrugged. "I go bowling with my uncle sometimes." Of course she did. Because, of course, Morgan Wright was the kind of person who effortlessly good at everything, while I had the upper body strength of a particularly determined gerbil. I grabbed the ball, one that was far too heavy, stepped into the lane, and immediately chucked it in the direction into the gutter. Morgan gasped dramatically. I turned slowly. "Do not say a word." Her eyes sparkled. "I wouldn't dream of it." "You're thinking it." She nodded in a mocking tone. "Oh yeah." I sighed, dragging a hand down my face. "This is embarrassing." Morgan nudged my shoulder. No, Mac. Losing to me is embarrassing. I groaned, but I couldn't even pretend to be mad because Morgan wasn't making fun of me. Not really. She was laughing with me instead of at me. And maybe that's why I loved her. Not because she was beautiful. No, she was. Not because she was effortlessly cool. Though she was that too. But because I was with her. I didn't feel like some dumb kid with too many jokes and not enough sense to shut up. I felt like someone who mattered. We played 2 more games and lost both of them spectacularly. By the time we finally left, the air outside had turned sharp and crisp, the night stretching quiet and endlessly above us. The star had come out in full force, spilling across the sky like shattered salt. For a second, I thought maybe we were the only 2 people in the world. Morgan tugged her hoodie tighter and around herself, her breath curling in the cold. You're really bad at bowling. I groaned. Are you ever gonna let it go? She smirked. Not a chance. I bumped my shoulder against hers. Well, I was letting you in. Oh, sure. Yeah, being a gentleman. Morgan side-eyed me. Mac, you literally said I'm going to destroy you before the first round. Sighed dramatically. I regret my past self. She laughed, shaking her head. Then she glanced at me, a little softer this time. This was fun, she murmured. My heart skipped a beat. I nodded quickly. Yeah, totally. And then she reached over and took my hand in hers. Not in a big dramatic way that sent my brain into a panic mode, but just casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe for her it was. For me, I felt like my heart was going to explode, because holding Morgan Wright's hand on a Friday night under the sky full of stars, that was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Returning to Heather. Kevin's house smelled like cigarettes, the kind of place that had been soaked through with lingering stains of beer, bad decisions, and it wasn't necessarily filthy, but it always felt like the walls were on the verge of collapse. The floors had long since given up on being anything but irreparably blackened. Alan knocked twice and tried the handle. Locked. So we waited somewhere down the block. Lomar coughed to life, sputtering before catching into a steady drone. He said he'd be ready by now. Don muttered, shifting his weight. I swear to God if he overslept again. Then we heard a loud thud, followed by a series of crashing sounds, like a set of speakers, falling down several flights of stairs. There was a low groan, followed by a long pause. Then we heard the slow dragging sound of footsteps. The door creaked open, just enough for Kevin squinting out at us, his hair a mess, his shirt wrinkled like he had slept in. Damn, Alan finally muttered. Did you just wake up? Kevin scowled. No. Then he pushed the door open. The rest of the way, bottle rolled out, hitting the pavement with a sharp, brittle sound. The glass shattering into 100 tiny fragments, amber liquid spreading out through the porch in a slow, syrupy tendrils. Inside the house was dim. The afternoon sun pushing through the closet, closed blinds in thin, exhausted lines, and there, sitting in his usual spot, was Kevin's dad. Exactly where we had left him last time, the time before that, and probably every time in between. He was slouched in his recliner, a half-empty beer bottle balanced loose in his fingers, his eyes on the television, but not really watching. The news was on. Some guy in a suit talking about the stock market, but the sound was turned down low. Kevin sighed through his nose. Dad. His father didn't move, didn't blink. He just sat there, taking slow, methodical sips from the bottle in his hand, his only savior. Alan shoved his hands in his pocket. Mac couldn't make it, he said, in an attempt to fill the silence. Had to work. Kevin bent down, picking up the bigger shards of glass, tossing them into the dead flower bed beside the porch, where he had joined the pile of broken glass that lay there habitually. Hold on, he muttered. Let me grab my shoes. He stepped inside, leaving Alan and Don standing awkwardly on the porch. I hesitated, then followed Kevin inside. The air was stale, thick, with the lingering weight of old cigarette smoke, the faint bite of liquor settling into the furniture, the walls, the very bones of the house itself. High up on the far wall, his father's memories were still there. Photographs, medals, old flags, folded into neat triangles. A display case held a collection of dog tags, a lighter with an eagle etched into it, a rusted K K-bar knife with the leather grip worn smooth, and above the fireplace hung the rifle. Kevin's dad never talked about it, never told stories about the jungle, about the heat, about the things he had seen and done. But Ward lived here anyway. You could feel it in the intoxicating quiet and the palpable air of tension. The house had always wound tight, as if enemy combatants would come surging from beneath the couch cushions at any moment. Kevin came back, still putting on his sneakers. All right, he said, grabbing his jacket. Let's go. His dad didn't look up, didn't say goodbye. He just took another sip and continued to watch the news on mute. Kevin had told us that he had a plan, which meant Kevin was going to embarrass himself. That was just how it worked. The second the words left his mouth, I knew this day was going to be one for the record books. Alan knew it, too, because he was already grinning. Don just leaned back at the picnic table, hands behind his head, eagerly waiting for the show to start. Kevin rolled his shoulder, standing up. All right, boys, he said, filled with the bravado stolen from a muscle-bound action heroes from the silver screen. Time to make history. Alan snorted. Yeah, and how exactly are you planning to do that? Kevin grinned confidently. The look of a man who unlocked every secret within the Library of Alexandria. And then, God help us, he flexed, his face shifting hues with the strain. I squinted. You doing something? Kevin's face twitched, his cheeks flushing red. Shut up. Alan bit his knuckle, trying not to laugh. Oh my God. Kevin turned away from us, rolling his shoulder again like that would somehow make him buffer. I've been working out, he said, nodding towards the pool. I think it's time to show off a little. Oh, this is gonna be bad, Alan muttered. Mentally preparing himself. Who is it? Don asked nervously. Samantha Parsons, Kevin murmured reverently, holding back a syllable of her name like an appeal to the heavens. Alan immediately doubled over, laughing. The lifeguard? I asked, blinking. Kevin grinned. Yeah, you mean the 18-year-old lifeguard. Kevin's smile faded and he paused silent for a moment, trying to think of a suitable response. Age is just a number. Huh? Alan wheezed, a sound in between a crackle and a racking cough, spluttering on his drink. Oh my God, Kevin, no. It was 100 degrees out. The town pool was packed, kids splashing in the shallow end, teenagers lounging on the towels, parents standing by the fence, chatting while their toddlers wobbled into the floaties. Then there was Kevin, standing at the edge of the pool, hands on his hips, pretending to survey the area like a king overseeing his kingdom. Instead, he wound up looking like a toddler, peeing hands free at the urinal with his pants around his ankles, none yet understanding his concept. Alan leaned forward, a question on his lips. Why is he standing like that? I shrugged, trying to look cool probably. He looks like he's about to give a speech. Kevin took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, then ripped off his white shirt. Alan immediately lost it, shaking with silent laughter. Holy shit. He looks the same, Don whispered. He literally looks the exact same. Kevin, completely unaware of how stupid he looked, tossed the shit to the side like it was an action movie star, then ran a hand through his hair, messing up a way he clearly thought was attractive. Alan was crying from tears of laughter streaking down his face. Oh my God. Kevin ignored us, taking a step forward towards the lifeguard chair. Samantha Parsons was a head lifeguard, 19 years old, with the tall, long legs, her dark hair flowing down to her shoulders like a waterfall of Stygian ichor. She sat perched on the lifeguard chair, lazily twirling her whistle around her fingers, sunglasses pushed up on the top of her head. She was absolutely gorgeous, and Kevin, like an absolute dumbass, thought that he stood a chance. Alan leaned over to Don. What do you think the odds that he drowns? Like, immediately? Yeah. Don nodded, mulling over it in his head for a second. 50-50. Kevin rolled his shoulders and took a deep breath. He strode up to the lifeguard chair, leaned against the metal bars, and flashed his baby teeth in what he probably thought was a charming, roguish grin. Instead, settling for a strained smile reminiscent of before people in ads for constipation medicine. Samantha didn't even look at him. Her eyes locked onto the water, gazing out at the cacophony of noise that erupted both ends of the pool, from old to young throats alike. Kevin cleared his throat, attempting to deepen his voice slightly, and failing miserably. Hot out today. Samantha nodded. Yep. Kevin flexed his arm slightly, nodding his head confidently. I winced. So, you watch a lot of people drown, or... Samantha finally turned to look at him, frowning. Kevin panicked, slicking his hair back nervously. I mean, you ever saved anybody before? Samantha stared at him, raising one perfect eyebrow. Yeah. Kevin nodded several times, desperately racking his brain for any idea what to say next. Alan was dying, holding back peals of laughter. Dawn had to turn away. I was considering pretending I didn't know him. Kevin swallowed, so, Alan practically shook with anticipation. You seeing anyone? Samantha blinked, a small smile tugging the corner of her mouth, trying desperately not to laugh. Alan squeezed his eyes shut, already doubled over with laughter. Kevin's face was bright red, the color of freshly sliced tomatoes. Samantha won her battle against laughter, returning her gaze to the swimmers lazily basking in the cool water. Yeah, she said, adjusting her sunglasses. I actually am. Kevin went completely still, as rigid as an ancient diving board that towered over them both. Oh, he muttered. Cool. That's cool. Samantha turned back towards the pool, already done with this conversation. Kevin nodded to himself, trying to play it off. Well, I should probably... And then fate, as an infinite cruelty, decided to make this moment even worse. Because Kevin went to take a step back, he slipped, his foot wobbling, searching for a flat surface, but finding nothing but empty air. There was a horrible, gut-wrenching second where he realized what was happening. Suspended in the air, then he fell directly onto the pool, a loud smack echoing across the water like a gunshot at his back as his back hit the surface of the water, completely soaking the lifeguard stand. He surfaced with a grasp, coughing, sputtering, flailing around to grab onto the edge, his wet fingers scrabbling for a handhold on the rough surface of the pool edge. Alan lost it. Dawn collapsed against the fence. I covered my face in pure embarrassment, averting my eyes. Samantha just sighed, brushing her wet hair out of her eyes, and blew her whistle. No running by the pool, kid. Kevin groaned, floating in his own humiliation. Mac Peterson. The first time I came to the Quinn estate, I was a guest. The second time, I was an employee. At least that's how Dad framed it when he told me I'd be spending part of my summer working there. Good experience, he said, buttoning his cuffs in a halfway mirror. Gets you used to the value of hard work. Rich folks pay well, Mom added, barely looking up from her coffee, and we owe them. I wasn't sure what we owed them for, but I knew better than to ask. The Quinn estate looked different in the summer. The windows glistened in heavy sunlight, the massive white columns gleamed like bones, and the long stretch of green leading up to the house looked so perfectly manicured. I half expected it to be fake. I arrived on Monday morning, backpack slung over my shoulders, the heat already pressing down on me like a thick wool blanket. Miss Quinton answered the door this time. She was wearing a linen sundress, her ears glimmering with pearls, her expression calm and measured, a pleasant look upon to her otherwise unremarkable face. Mac, she greeted, giving me a small, polite smile. How lovely, you're right on time. I stepped inside, wiping the sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand. The air conditioning hit me like a wall. It was cold in here, unnaturally cold. Like the house was fighting off the outside world, refusing to let the season touch it. Governor Quinn was already waiting in the sitting room, sipping his coffee, still in his robe despite the late hour. Now here's the side, he said, setting his mug down on the table beside him. You look like a boy ready to work. I strained. Yes, sir. He chuckled, rising to his feet. Good attitude. We'll make a man out of you yet. Miss Quinn placed a gentle hand on his arm, her grip lingering for just a second longer than necessary. It was that when I noticed that there was no pictures of the happy couple hanging on the walls. The list is on the counter, she said softly. I'll check in later. The governor winked at her, then turned back to me, clapping his hands together. All right, Mac, let's get started. My first job was trimming the hedges. They stretched along the driveways like centuries, cut into the perfectly squared rows, without a single leaf out of place. I spent an hour crouched in the heat, hands aching, sweat sighting down my back like molasses, while the governor sat in the shade of the porch, a glass of something dark and amber in one hand watching. You've got good work ethic. He called me over after a while, voice thick with approval. I like that. I didn't stop working. Honestly, I didn't really know what to say to that. He took a slow sip of his drink. Does your father take you hunting? I nodded, shifting my grip on to the shears. Yes, sir. Every winter. Good. Every boy ought to know how to handle a gun. Something in his tone made me pause. I glanced up, expecting to be smiling, to be giving me one of those big, easy grins like he always did. But he wasn't. His expression was neutral, almost unreadable. His gaze level as he assessed me. I shrugged, looked back down, and kept cutting. By midday, I was dying. The heat had worked its way into my bones, filling my lungs with like I was breathing steam instead of air. My shirt clung to my back, damp with sweat, and the world felt like it was swimming in gold light, shifting at the edges, rippling like the surface of a pool. Boy, Governor Quinn called from the deck chair. You're gonna catch a fever wearing all that. I stopped mid-sweep, blinking at him. He was lounging beneath. Oh, fuck no. Please don't. Please don't. He was lounging beneath a strapped umbrella, his white linen shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a pair of dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. Miss Quinton was beside him, sipping lemonade, her legs crossed at the ankles, the pool water shimmering behind like a glass. She tilted her head slightly, looking me over. The heat is relentless this time of year, she said. You'll work better if you're comfortable. I hesitated. There was something about the way she said it. Soft, encouraging, almost motherly, that made it feel like a suggestion. Like I could say no if I wanted to, but I didn't. Because what kind of 12-year-old says no to two of the most powerful people in the state? So I pulled my shirt off. Miss Quinton's eyes didn't leave me, and neither did his. I went back to work, sweeping like my life depended on it. I finished cleaning the pool with the governor's voice in my ear. He didn't leave the deck chair, just lounged there, drink in hand, talking while I scrubbed at the tiles. It's an important thing, he mused. Knowing your place in the world. I nodded, kneeling by the water, running the brush along the pool floor, and watching the dirt dissolve into nothingness. A man's gotta understand what's expected of him. Brush, scrub. What's owed to him. Brush, scrub. And what he owes in return. The sun pressed down, hot and heavy, but the back of my neck felt cold. You understand what I'm saying, don't you, Mac? I stopped scrubbing and turned my head slightly, just enough to see him peering down at me over his sunglasses. Waiting. Watching. I got a feeling this question wasn't rhetorical and hurriedly nodded my head. Yes, sir. A slow smile crept across his face, different from his usual grin. I knew you would. Morgan Wright. The sun was melting into the horizon like caramel, stretching its long golden beams across the yard, casting the world into a hazy, honey-colored light that almost came into the tail end of the summer. The air was thick, warm, heavy with the scent of freshly cut grass, the distant smokiness of someone's grilling at a late dinner. The cicadas were screaming in the trees, their song rising, falling like the tide. The only sound in the otherwise still evening. I was sitting on the porch, swing, barefoot, my heels knocking lazily against the wooden boards as I watched the road, waiting. The ice in my lemonade had long since melted, the condensation dripping down on the side of the glass and pooling beneath my fingers. Mac was late again. And I wasn't mad, I just didn't like the way things felt whenever he came back from the house on the hill. The Quinn estate, with its high white columns, its too perfect long. It was like he left in the morning as Mac and came back as the evening as someone else, someone smaller, someone sadder. The screen door creaked behind me. I glanced back just as my dad stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on an old dish towel. He was still wearing his unshaven scruff, his eyes bloodshot and strained. I could smell the faint smell of ink and varnish clinging to him. I know he'd been stressed out with work lately, and I noticed that he'd been hugging me a little tighter each time I left the house. Max still out at the Quintons, he said, squinting towards the road. I nodded. Dad made a low noise in his throat. He didn't say anything else, but he didn't have to. The way his mouth pressed into a firm line, the way his fingers curled tight around the dish towel, it was enough. I glanced up at the auburn sky. The sun starting to dip behind the trees, and I knew what that meant. Mac had been at Quinton's all day again. Even from here, I could tell he was exhausted. His shirt was balled up into a fist, his hair damp, sticking to his forehead, his skin flushed red from the heat. He walked slowly, shoulders slumped, the way people did when they had been on their feet for too long, dragging himself on the sidewalk like every step took effort. I straightened up. Mac! He glanced up, blinking like he hadn't realized where he was. Then he smiled. Not the big, teasing grin he usually gave me, just a small one. Tired one. Hey, Morgan. I hopped down from the porch, meeting him before he reached the steps. Woof, I muttered, wrinkling my nose. It smelled like chlorine. Mac huffed out a laugh. That's what happens when you spend 7 hours skimming a rich guy's pool. I frowned. That made you clean the pool the whole time? Mac hesitated. I knew him well enough to see it. The way his fingers tightened around the fabric of his shirt. The way his eyes flickered for a second before he shook his head. Yeah, more or less. He said, brushing past me, but I grabbed his arm. Mac. He stopped when he finally turned back to me, and I saw it. That exhausted, hollowed out look he tried to hide. The one I only ever saw after he spent the whole day at the Quinn estate. Mac glanced at me, towards the porch, towards the shadow of my father standing by the door. He hesitated for half a second and shook his head. That was all I needed to know. I reached for his wrist, tugging him inside. Come on. The kitchen was dimly lit, the last rays of sunlight filtering through the open window. The old ceiling fans humming softly overhead. The air was cooler here. The warmth of the day is finally beginning to fade, giving way to the kind of comfort, stillness that made summer nights feel endless. Mac leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. His shoulders slumped, his unusual easygoing posture stripped away, leaving only the exhaustion behind it. I pulled open the fridge and grabbed the lemonade, pouring him a glass. You need to get some sugar in your system before you drop it on my floor, I said, handing it to him. Mac took it with a tired smirk. Your mom would love that. I started. She stepped over your body to mop the floor first. There made me a small, genuine laugh. It sounds quiet, but real. I felt like some sort of the tension in my chest was at ease. He took a sip, his eyes slipping shut for a second. I didn't say anything. I just watched them. The way his shoulders slowly uncoiled, the way the deep crease between his brows smoothed out, the way his grip around the glass loosened as the lemonade cooled him from the inside out. He always came back like this, hollowed out, and every time I did the same thing. Pulled him inside, sat him down, gave him something sweet to drink, and little by little, I watched himself put himself back together. Later we sat on the back porch, watching the sky fade from the gold to deep to dusky blue. The fireflies were starting to come out, blinking lazily in the tall grass, their tiny lights flickering like they were breathing. Mac leaned back on his elbows, stretching out his legs in front of him, his lemonade glass empty behind him. This is nice, he murmured. I tilted my head. Yeah? Yeah. I smiled. He looked comfortable for the first time all day. I nudged him with my foot. You're not allowed to disappear over there all summer, you know? Max sighed, tilting his head back, up to stare at the sky. It's just a job, Morgan. You're 12, Mac. You're not supposed to have a job. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the sky, his expression unreadable. Then he finally shrugged. It's just how it is. I hated that answer. I hated the way he said, as if it was set in stone, like it was something that couldn't be changed, but I didn't push. Instead, I nudged him a little, soft this time. Hey. He turned his head towards me, his messy brown hair curling in the softly fading light. I smiled. I know you're gonna be okay, right? Mac blinked, caught off guard. I could see the doubt flicker across his face for a second before he smirked. Oh yeah? Yeah. I bumped my shoulder against his because I said so. I got a real laugh from him for now. And that was enough. Dawn Spooner. We've been planning this hunting trip for a week, which might as well have been a year. To have canceled now would be beyond devastating. Kevin and I had gone over it every day at school in hushed voices like we were planning a bank heist instead of walking the tree line behind his dad's property and trying to scare up a squirrel. We'd even drawn battle plans like its margins in our notebook. So when I woke up that morning, the first thing I thought about wasn't breakfast or school or anything. It was the pellet gun beneath my bed. The second thing was Nathan was yelling. Now there's a distinct difference between yelling and crying. Crying means something's wrong. Yelling means he's bored, announcing it to the world like a town crier. Don! He shouted from across the hallway. Oliver touched my stuff. I sat up in bed, rubbed my face. What? And then Sam started crying from the other room. The day began, whether I wanted it to or not. I reluctantly rolled out of bed. My feet hit the cold floor. I put on yesterday's jeans and a t-shirt, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and went down the hall. I knew Mom was already gone before I had even checked the clock. There was a note on the kitchen table that said that I'd seen last night. Don, be good. I'll be back later. You know the drill. I knew the drill. Down the hall, Nathan's door was already open. He was sitting on the floor in his underwear, turning a plastic check over, like he was checking to see if it still worked. Where's Mom? He asked. At work, I said, which is what I always said. Oliver was still asleep, sprawled sideways on his bed like he'd fallen there. I shook his shoulder. Ollie, get up. He groaned, pulled the blanket over his head. Sam crying got louder, sharp now, offended. I'm coming, I called. No, I wasn't sure I was saying it to. I wasn't sure who I was saying it to. Sam was in his crib, standing up, shaking the railings like he had thought the whole thing might come loose if he tried hard enough. His face was red and wet, tufts of his baby hair sticking up like little spikes. When he saw me, he reached out with both of his hands, hiccuping. Hey, I said, lifting him up and out. He was warm and heavy and smelled like sleep and something sour. He pressed his face into my shoulder and quieted down, just like that. What's up, Nathan? My stuff, Nathan said, which meant nothing and everything. He was 6 and had the energy of a firecracker. His hair stuck up on one side like he'd been struck by lightning in his sleep. Nathan stood behind him, 4 years old, already defensive, clutching a plastic dinosaur with one leg missing. I just looked at it, Oliver said. Nathan's face crumpled. He breathed on it. I closed my eyes for a second. Just 1 second. Okay, I said. Nobody breathed on anyone else's stuff. Problem solved. It's already breathed on, Nathan said. All right, I said, patting Sam on the back. Everybody to the kitchen. Getting 3 kids fed was like herding cats that were also sticky. In the kitchen, I set Sam in a high chair, went through the routine. I lined them up at the table the way Mom did, smallest to biggest. Mostly Sam wouldn't throw his food on the floor as easily. I poured cereal, a bit too much for Oliver, not enough for Nathan. Then more for Nathan. When he complained, Sam got toast torn into pieces because he liked it to mash it in his hair. The milk sloshed over the rim of the bowl and onto the table, where I quickly wiped it down with a paper towel. I had time. Kevin wouldn't care if he was a few minutes late. Nathan climbed onto his chair by himself and beamed up at me proudly. I can do it. That's all, I said. Good job. Oliver kicked the table with his heel. What are we doing today? Watching TV, I said. Drawing, not killing each other. That's boring, he said. You love TV. I already watched TV yesterday. Well, I said you're gonna love it again. Nathan made dinosaur noises and crashed his legless T-Rex into Sam's toast. Sam laughed, banged his head against the tray, sending bits of toast skittering to the ground. I moved around the kitchen fast. I put the lunches in the fridge, bologna sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. I laid out clothes on the couch in case they spilled something. I set up the VCR up on the tape, already rewound, because Oliver didn't know how Nathan liked to press buttons just to see what happened. I laid out the usual ground rules. No opening the door, no going outside. If Sam cries, you check his diaper. If the phone rings, you don't answer it. Oliver nodded, like he understood. Nathan nodded because Oliver had. Sam clapped. My pellet rifle waited by the door. I cleaned it the night before, slow and careful, like it might be offended if I rushed. I slung it over my shoulder. I felt a little thrill of the weight of it. The way it made me feel taller, older. In my room, I grabbed the pellet rifle from under the bed. It was cheap, mostly plastic, but it was mine. I slid it into its case and slung it over my shoulder. For a second, I stood there, listening. The noise of the TV drifted down the hall. For one blessed moment, there was no crying, no yelling. I wrote a note on a scrap piece of paper and left it on the counter just in case. Where are you going? Oliver asked without taking his eyes off the TV. Out, I said. That's not fair. I'll be back. When? Later. He frowned, processing that. You better. I will. I hesitated at the door, hand on the knob, listening. The TV droned down, Sam babbled, Nathan made quiet dinosaur noises. Oliver had already forgotten me. That was good. That was cool. Outside, the air was sharp and cold, a shock to the sense. I breathed it in, adjusted the strap of the rifle on my shoulder. The street was empty. Early morning sunlight catching on the windows of the houses. Kevin's place was 6 minutes away. I walked fast, my boots scuffing the pavement as excitement buzzed beneath my skin. Kevin Sherman. I woke up already knowing that it was going to be a good day. As always, the first thing I heard was the TV. Some guy yelling about prices and freedom and numbers that didn't seem to mean much to me. The sound leaked down the hall like a billowing smoke. I even have to look to know Dad wasn't in the recliner. He always was. If the house ever burned down, I figured they'd find a skeleton still sitting there next burnt to the TV box. I lay in bed for a second, staring at the posters on my wall. They were crooked, taped up corners, a picture of a deer with huge antlers, and an old Dukes of Hazzard poster. The General Lee was cool, but Daisy was my favorite. Today was hunting day. Me and Don, pellet guns. Yeah, but still, we've been planning it out for a week, which meant it was basically sacred. I rolled out of bed, put on jeans, stiff with old mud, and my favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt. The floors creaked when I stepped onto the hallway. Dad didn't move. He never did unless he had to. The table was cluttered with empty cans, ashtrays. The air smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke. He was slumped in the recliner, one hand dangling, his eyes half open but not seeing much at all. Morning, I said, mostly to prove a point. He grunted a greeting. He talked to me. I knew today was going to be a good day. Smiling, I went into the kitchen, opened the fridge. There wasn't much. Half a carton of milk that smelled suspicious, some bologna, pickles, and a 6-pack shoved in the drawer marked vegetables. I took the milk anyway and poured it over some bowl of cereal that got a little soft in the box. I ate standing up, leaning against the counter, chewing fast like somebody might run in and take it from me if I didn't. The TV volume jumped. Suddenly Dad had murmured slurs under his breath as he scrambled for the remote. I pretended not to hear him. I was good at pretending. After breakfast, I grabbed my pellet gun from the corner of the door. The wood was scratched up and chipped, but it worked just fine. I'd been my dad's when he was my age, and it was my last Christmas present. I checked the pellets in the tin, counted them, then shoved them back into my pocket. Slung the rifle over my shoulder. I caught my skinny reflection in the dark window. All elbows and too tight clothes. I grinned at myself anyway, admiring the weaponry mounted on my shoulder. That's how confidence worked. You faked it long enough till it was real. Going out, I called. Dad lifted his beer in response. That was twice in one day. Outside, the flush of cold air hit me, washed the dour stank of the house off of me. I stood on the porch for a second, breathing it in. Down the road, I saw Don coming towards me, his rifle over his shoulder, half jogging, half walking. I stepped off the porch to meet him, grinning before he got too close. Don was smiling too. That crooked little grin he got when he was nervous and excited. About time, I said, even though he wasn't late. It was important to establish dominance early on. Says you, and breathed a little short. Says you, he said, breath a little short from running over. You ready? I tapped the stock on my rifle. Born ready. And that wasn't necessarily true, but it sounded good. Don nodded, his pellet gun slung over his shoulder in a soft case, the plastic stock peeking out of its zipper. We started down the road, our boots crunching on the gravel path. The house thinned out fast as trees crowded in on both sides, their bare branches calling at the sky. The woods were right there, waiting, dark and quiet, and the way they made you feel like they were stepping into someone else's room without knocking. Don glanced at my rifle like he always did. He never said anything about it, but I could tell he was thinking about it. Mine had weight, real weight, a wood stock, and a real metal that was cold even through its sling. His looked like a plastic toy you could win at a fair. Bet mine shoots straighter, I said. But mine doesn't kick like it's mad at me, he shot back. I laughed and shoved him. He stumbled a little, but didn't fall. We moved deeper into the woods, ducking past branches, stepping when the ground looked darker, so we didn't snap twigs. That was most of what I knew about hunting, but I hope Dawn didn't notice. That creek should be just up ahead, Dawn whispered, even though there was no one to hear him. Yeah, I said. I know. We crouched behind a fallen log like it was a foxhole. I rested my rifle on it, feeling the worn groove where my dad's hand must have gone 1,000 times. Don fumbled with his case, sliding out his rifle and mirroring my movement. We didn't talk for a bit, just listened to the wind in the branches as something small skidded away in the brush. My heart thumped away in my chest. I hoped Don couldn't hear it. So, I said, finally glancing at him as I broke the silence. You stuck Bella the brat? He stiffened. What? I grinned. Got him. Yeah, you do. He didn't answer right away, which was an answer enough. His ears went red, which is even better. Yeah, he finally said, I guess. You guess, I repeated. Man, you're hopeless. He stopped, searching for the words like they might be hiding under a rock. She's nice. Nice, I said. That's it. And smart. And she's really pretty. That's a dangerous territory there, man. He smiled. Despite himself, his neck reddened, his eyes locked onto the woods as if he was too embarrassed to look at me. I don't know how to talk to her. You're talking right now. It's different. Why? Because it's you. I shrugged. I guess so. We waited. Nothing moved except an ugly little bird hopping between branches, watching us like we were the stupid ones. I got bored. I always did. I like Tricia, you know, I said. Donald whipped his head around. Tricia Langley? Yeah. Since when? Since you wore that blue shirt last week. He blinked. That's it? What else do you need? She's kind of mean. Mean girls are honest, I said. Plus she smells good. He made a face. You like every girl. So? I said. What's wrong with that? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He thought about it for a minute. I don't know. Seems like it doesn't mean anything if you like all of them. I leaned against the log, looking up through the branches. No, stupid. It means I've got a lot of options. I guess, he mumbled, shrugging his shoulders. Yeah, man, I said. You don't know girls like I do. We sat there a little longer after that, letting my wisdom settle on the morning air. Don didn't argue, which meant I'd finally said something smart, or he was thinking about Bella again. Probably the second one. There's a bit of rustling from the trees beyond the embankment, far out of range. I craned my head to get a better look, and for a moment, it looked like the silhouette of a man in a suit and a broad-brimmed hat. I rubbed my eyes and squinted again, only to see a weirdly shaped pile of leaves. Rolling my eyes, I turned my attention back to the hollow before us. After another half hour, the woods finally decided to show us something worth the trouble. I heard it before I saw it. A scratching sound somewhere off to our right. I stiffened, held up my hand without thinking. There, I whispered, nodding up into the trees. The squirrel sat at a low branch, gray and puffed up on his perch. It twitched its tail, stopped, twitched it again. It was sitting out in the open, completely unaware of the threat that lurked behind a fallen log and 6-size shoes. The first instinct was to raise my rifle, but Don was already lining up his plastic stock tucked into his shoulder and his face scrunched up into concentration like he was defusing a bomb. Go on, I whispered before he bolts. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can, I said. Just breathe and aim like we practiced. We had not practiced. He squinted one eye shut and let out a shaky sigh. The squirrel's head tilted towards us as if it knew. The crack of the pellet gun was loud in the cold morning air. The squirrel jerked, lost its grip, and fell, thudding against the leaves below. The silence after the shot was deafening. Don didn't move, and I didn't either. We stared at the spot where it had fallen like it might get back up and yell at us for cheating. Did I hit it? Dawn asked. I stood up slowly, my pulse slowing now that it was over. Walked towards the fallen animal. I nudged the scroll with my boot, but it didn't stir. Yeah, I said. You hit it. He came over and stood beside me. Up close, the scroll looked smaller than I had in the tree. Its eyes were glassy, mouth slightly open, like I had been caught, they thought. Oh, Dawn said. I don't know what to say. I've been imagining this part all week. High fives, bragging rights, maybe even mounting it on a mantelpiece like my dad did with my grandpa. But standing there, looking at it, my stomach felt weird. Dawn crouched down, staring at the tiny animal. I didn't think it'd be like that. I nodded, yeah. We stood there dumbfounded for a while, while processing what just happened. Eventually it began to dawn on me. Yes! I shouted up, throwing up my arms. You nailed it, man! Dawn jumped with the gun and fired again. Birds exploded out of the trees, flapping their wings as they fled. Farther off, something crashed throughout the underbush, running for its life like the woods had caught on fire. I let out a peal of laughter, sound bursting out of me before I could stop it. The weird tight feeling in my chest cracked open and let the noise fly out. You shot it, I yelled. First try, dude, that's awesome. Dawn laughed, startled and breathless. You scared everything away. Worth it, I said, grinning now, the feeling burning off like fog. First kill, that's a big deal. He looked down at the scroll again, then back at me. I guess. No guess about it, I said. Dawn smiled tentatively, basking in the glory of his success. So, what do we do now? I looked at the scroll, then back at him. We take it. Take it where? Back. I said it was obvious. You don't just leave it. That'd be messed up. He hesitated. You sure? Yeah, my dad know what to do with it probably. I found a stick and hooked it under the scroll, prodding it, flipping it over as I lifted it up by its tail. It was heavier than I thought it'd be. Come on, I said. Can't stand around all day. He grinned ruefully, slung his rifle back over his shoulder. We headed back the way we came, our boots crunching against the pine needles as the woods slowly settled behind us. I didn't say anything out loud, but I felt something had shifted. Like we'd crossed some great invisible Rubicon. And yeah, it was a little scary, but I felt unstoppable. Dawn Spooner. That night, I lay on my back, staring up at the ceiling, at the crack right above my head that ran the length of the room like a scar. I could hear the heather clicking, the pipe sighting, the soft tick of the clock on the kitchen wall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the squirrel's little body against the brown leaves. I pulled the sheet up over my chest and let the blanket encircle me with its warmth. It was the same blanket I've always had, thin, readable at the corners, smelling faintly of laundry detergent and of mom. I shifted uncomfortably as the sharp little knife of air slipped down the neck of the blanket and settled right between my shoulders. My breath fogged for a second, puffing out on the surface of the room. I sat up fast, the blanket shifting alongside me. The hairs along my arms pricked like someone had run a finger over them. Nothing was out of place. My window was closed, and then outside was pitch black. Only the rare streetlight to break the monotonous darkness. With the start, I realized the curtain by my window were moving, rustling, like someone was walking through them, the fabric shifting as if faces and hands were pressed up against the cloth. My breath kept frosting in the front of my face. The warm air from my lungs making white ghosts spiraling upward in the dark. My throat constricted with fear as my instincts screamed that something was in the room with me. It seemed as if the shadows were pooling and shifting, forming odd silhouettes that were almost human. No, I was sure. I saw a shape peel itself away from the corner. Tall, long-limbed, and hazy as billowing smoke. I squeezed my eyes shut. If I don't move, it can't get me. It was the oldest rule. I curled into myself, my knees drawn up tight. I pulled the blankets over my head as the fabric drew taut around me. I turned to face the fold of my arm and let the pillow press against my cheek, shielding me from the shadows. I clutched it with both hands, my fingers digging into as if I could anchor myself to the pillow. Eventually, my breathing slowed. I no longer felt the scrape of shadowy claws along the surface of my skin. I imagined the figures dissolving as the shadows took their position for the coming day. Sleep came to me in pieces, shallow and uneasy, pulling me under as I stayed up curled, hiding away from the smoky shadows and praying to God that the morning would come and bless me with the light of the sun. Mac. I had been working for the Quintons for months. By the time I saw the estate in its full golden splendor, I realized what kind of people came here. The governor and his wife were always entertaining someone. That much I had already figured out. Whether it was politicians, businessmen, or old college friends from his Yale law school days, there was always a reason for the house to be filled with cigar smoke and laughter. Most of the time I stayed out of sight, tucked away in the yard, in the pool house, or in the kitchen grabbing another bottle of whatever liquid had run dry that evening. Now, most of the time, I didn't care, until one night when Governor Quinton decided I should be a part of the entertainment. It was late September, the heat still lingering in the air like a ghost of the summer, but the nights had grown cooler, the edges of the magnolia trees tipped with the first signs of autumn. I had been outside all day, trimming hedges, pulling weeds, skimming dead leaves off the pool, the hours stretching long and slow beneath the sky bleeding into the dusk. I was almost finished when I heard the first car pull into the driveway, followed by two others. I turned and squinted towards the front of the house, where the driveway was filled with a row of sleek black cars, shining chrome grills, and the men stepping out a variety of shapes and sizes, hailing from all parts of the country. Dressed in wildly different outfits, but belying their chosen occupations. Inside, the house was already coming alive. Through the open windows, I could hear the hubbub of voices, the clinking of glass bottles, the pop of the cork being pulled from a bottle. The Quintons were throwing another party, a big one. Mac. I turned as the government stepped out of the terrace, smiling down at me, dressed sharply in a black silk blazer and a tie, the color of an old blood. Come here, son, he said, gesturing me forward with a radiant grin. I want you to meet some folks. I hesitated. The pool net was still in my hands. My fingers wrapped tightly around the pool as cold sweat cooled onto the back of my neck. Something about his tone felt different today. The way he was looking at me sent a chill crawling down my spine, but I didn't argue. Because boys like me didn't get to say no to men like him. I'm really scared of what that implies. So I set the net down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and followed him inside. The house was warmer than usual, maybe from the sheer amount of bodies, the heat of men packed together in the hallways as their voices filled with the air with thick cigar smoke. I caught glimpses of faces I recognized from TV screens, from famous newspapers, from the back covers of books lined up in the dad's study. There was a senator from New York shaking hands with a man I had seen giving financial reports on CNN. A famous country singer, bourbon in hand, coughed obnoxiously, clapped a Hollywood producer on the back, his oversized golden watch catching the firelight. In the center of it all, Quinton moved like a man in his element, his presence effortless, yet magnetic, his hands brushing across shoulders, gripping arms, and tilting heads closer to his own, as he spoke in that syrupy voice that demanded obedience. We passed by a set of basement doors that were normally locked with an ornate chain. Now the chain hung from a coat hook, and the door was slightly ajar. Warm light and the soft sounds of frenzied scuffling flowing from the betwixt the gap. He led me into the main living room, adorned by high ceilings and exuberant amount of throw pillows. There was a man sitting in the governor's chair, nursing a glass of dark amber, the sleeves of his button rolled up halfway up his forearms. He wasn't as old as I expected. In his early 50s maybe. He had broad shoulders with a weak jaw, fluffy graying hairs brushed back, and a pair of dark, thick-rimmed glasses placed promptly on his nose. He looked like a man who had belonged here, sitting comfortably in the hostess chair. Quinn smiled his performative grin. Mac, he said, guiding me forward with a hand light on my back. This here is Mr. Kessinghour. I swallowed nervously as I connected the name of the face of the man that sat expectantly before me. He was a former Secretary of State, the man who had shaped foreign policy for a decade, the man whose face had been on the cover of every major publication at least twice. He lifted his gaze and watched me with cool, calculating eyes. Governor tells me you're a hard worker, kid. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that would kind of make a man feel safe or seal his fate with the stroke of a pen. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Yes, sir. A slow smile curled at the edge of his mouth. Good. He extended his hand. I shook it. His fingers were warm, but his grip was tight. Too tight, as if he had been measuring how much pressure I could take. The handshake lasted for far too long, maybe a minute or more. And then he let go, allowed me to massage my bruised knuckles. I felt like I could finally breathe again. Mac, Quinn said, clapping me on the back. Mr. Kissing Whore here thinks I should make a run for the presidency. He came all the way from DC to talk some sense to me about this upcoming election. Kissing Whore chuckled. Not sense, he said, swirling his drink. Just reminders. You should really talk to Elaine about the Senate. I didn't know what they were talking about. I decided that I didn't want to, but Quinn kept me there. His soft, flabby hand perched on my shoulder, his grip light but firm. You ever think about politics, Mac? Kessing asked, as if it was an afterthought. I don't know, I admitted, smiling nervously. Never really thought about it. Kessing smirked, a slow, sappy thing spreading across his weak chin like a spilled barbecue sauce. Well, he said, boys like you, they go far in this world. I don't know what that meant. I didn't ask, nor did I want to. I just nodded, the governor's hand still resting steadily between my shoulder blades and anchoring me in place. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. Heather Robinson. There was something strange about the way the air felt that morning. Thicker, somehow as if the sky was pressing down on the school and all of us inside. The gray clouds hung low, stretched like pull wool, threatening rain that never came. It wasn't the first time that the weather had been this way, but today, the feeling crawled under my skin, curled tight at the base of my spine, making me restless in a way that I couldn't explain. I had math for first period, and a quiz I had studied for. That was probably why my stomach was twisting itself into knots, and that's why my hands were shaking. Or maybe I was just cold. The halls were already buzzing with familiar chaos of morning chatter when I walked in. Backpacks unzipped, locker doors slammed, and the air was filled with the echo of sneakers squeaking against tile as kids rushed from one side onto the building onto the other, off to their morning classes. It was the same as it always was, so normal that the unease creeping through me felt ridiculous. I caught a sight of Mac leaning against his locker, arms crossed and grinning at something Kevin had just said. Kevin had his hands stuffed in his pockets and he was shaking his head, but I could tell he was trying not to laugh. Alan stood nearby, his fingers tapping against the strap of his backpack, eyes flickering towards the clock like he was already ready to leave. I shook the unease away as I approached them, rolling my shoulders as if I could physically chug away the weight sitting on my chest. Are you two ever going to stop arguing? I asked, raising an eyebrow at both of them. Kevin smirked. Not a chance. Matt grinned, slung an arm around my shoulder in greetings. It's part of the delicate balance of the universe, Heather. If Kevin and I don't bicker about useless crap, the world might actually implode. I snorted and elbowed him in the ribs. Alan was watching us, something fluttering across his face. He didn't say anything. He shifted his weight and muttered, 5 minutes till the bell. Matt groaned dramatically and let his head fall back against the lockers. Alan, you must be real fun at parties. Alan smirked. Good thing we don't get invited to any. Kevin checked his watch to let out a reluctant sigh and pushed out the wall. Guess I should get to class before Dawn gets there and takes a good seat. Mac made a face. Why are you so weirdly competitive about who gets to sit closer to the window? Kevin shrugged. Because I like the window. Alan raised his eyebrow. So, just sit in any of the multiple window seats. Kevin scoffed. No, not if Dawn's singing the best one. Max sighed. Unbelievable. I shook my head as the first bell rang. Cutting through the morning noise, the flood of students in the hallway shifted. Their voices growing louder, and just for a moment before the steady rhythm of the school day began. Kevin shot me a two-finger salute before disappearing down the hall, while Mac muttered something about math being a crime against humanity, and wandered off into the opposite direction. Alan and I started towards our own class, his footsteps falling in sync with mine. The first half of the day was slow. I spent most of history class watching the clock, willing the hands to move faster. Alan sat beside me, his gaze fixed on his notebook, but I knew he wasn't actually taking notes. He was gripping his pencil tightly for the past 20 minutes. His handwriting more scratches than words. He looked more anxious than I was. Mac had passed me a note at the beginning of the class. A terrible drawing of a velociraptor wearing sunglasses with the words, "This is you," written in block letters underneath. I rolled my eyes and tucked it into my pocket. In English, Kevin and Don were definitely not paying attention, whispering in the back of the room about something that made Kevin's shoulders shake with suppressed laughter. I should have been paying attention to the lesson, but instead, my mind kept drifting to that feeling I hadn't been able to shake since this morning. The air was still, too still, as if it was warning of the arrival of something bloodthirsty beat. I clenched my hands under my desk, swallowing hard. Stop it, Heather. By the time lunch rolled around, I was tired of my own thoughts. I grabbed my tray, made my way towards the usual table on the corner of the cafeteria where Alan was already sitting. He had his arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like he was expecting something. Expecting trouble? I asked, sliding into my seat across from him. Alan smirked faintly. Trouble finds us either way. Mac dropped into the seat beside me, set his tray down with a dramatic flourish. Alright, serious question. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be? Kevin slid into the chair next to Alan. Easy, pizza. Don sat down last and shook his head. Boring. Mac pointed at him. Wrong. Pizza is the perfect food. Pasta, I said, stealing one of Alan's fries. Alan shrugged. Burgers. Don leaned back. I go with steak. Mac gasped. What a luxurious choice. Kevin nudged his tray towards me. Heather settled this. Is steak a good answer, or does it lack sophistication? I smirked. I think you just want to say sophistication to sound sophisticated. Alan let out an amused sigh and shook his head, a smile playing across his face. For a moment, things finally felt normal. The final period of the day passed in a blur, scribbled notes, and restless shifting. It was warm outside. The kind of late summer warmth that sat thick in the air, slow and golden, and the afternoon light poured through the class windows in a way that made everything feel unnaturally peaceful. Coated in the invisible iridescent film, reserved for the happiest of dreams. Once I didn't know I was in. Once, I wish I could have stayed in forever. Mac was spinning his pencil between his fingers, barely listening to Mr. Corbin's lecture. Kevin had his head propped on one table, doodling, stupid, in the margin of his notebook. Alan was sitting next to me, tapping his finger against his knee like he had something on his mind. I was about to nudge him and ask what was wrong when I saw him. The same man was standing near the fence, just beyond the school parking lot. Not close enough to look suspicious, but just enough to blend in, like he belonged there. But he didn't. His suit was entirely too neat, dressed in a comfortable tweed of a college professor. His posture unnaturally rigid and still as a saltwater lake. No trace of breath ruffling his suit. Perfect suit. I watched as his head tilted slightly, just like before. With a sinking feeling, I realized that he was watching Alan. His sandy blonde head tucked down, low behind his desk. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I forked my fingers into the hams of Alan's sleeves and yanked gently, a chill running through my heart in a glacial fissure. He turned to me, his mouth opening like he was about to say something, but I nodded urgently towards the window. The man outside in the tweed suit. Alan curiously followed my gaze, but just like before, he was gone. No trace of him left curling in the wind. I swallowed down my anxiety, the frigid feeling curling in my stomach as the prick of the back of my neck spread to my arms. A sick, creeping unease, like when you think of it is in the room with you, but you turn and nothing is there. And Alan was looking at me now, confused, waiting for me to say something, but I didn't have the words because Alan was looking at me now. Confused, waiting for me to say something, but I didn't have the words because the first gunshot cracked through the air like splitting wood or distant firework, a sound I recognized immediately. Somewhere down the hall, someone screamed. Everything inside of me locked up as I froze in my seat. There was another shot, this one closer and louder. The walls felt thin, the classroom felt too big, too small all at once. The air too thick to breathe, the space between my ribs suffocating. For a moment, none of us moved. Lights off! Get down, now! Mr. Corbin's voice, sharp and panic, cut through the fog of confusion like a slap to the face. I don't know who moved first. Don't know if it was instinct or I had forced my body to listen, but suddenly I wasn't sitting anymore. The desk was scraping against the floor. Suddenly, Alan's fingers were wrapped around my waist. He was yanking me backwards, pulling me down, pulling me away while we were on the floor. Pressed against the supply cabinets, knees bent to our chest, bodies curled in the smallest spaces possible, and around us, the whole classroom had imploded into panic. The entire class scrambled, pulling themselves into whatever corner they could fit. Huddling behind desks and curling up beneath tables, someone was sobbing while another girl was whispering frantic, rapid prayers. Alan was next to me, too close, but not close enough, his breathing coming fast and shallow. He was looking at me like he didn't know what was happening, like he wanted me to tell him if this wasn't real. But I couldn't. I couldn't because the footsteps were in the hall now. I heard the scuffle of boots, each dreaded step moving impossibly slowly, one at a time, moving closer. I pressed my forehead to my knees, curled my fingers into my sleeves, squeezed my eyes shut so tight because I didn't want to see, didn't want to hear, didn't want to know how close, how near, how many steps away. The door handle twisted. A dry, quiet click. Locked. A heavy silence filled the room, draping over every frantic heartbeat that filled the small classroom. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might throw up. My lungs ached. How still I was holding myself, and then boom! The door shuddered violently in its frame. Someone near the front of the class let out a choked sob before they could stop themselves. Alan's hand clenched around my sleeve. For a second, silence. Boom! The door shook. Another scream. Someone couldn't help it. The shrill sounding filling the room as they broke. Another boom! And the glass shattered and the world exploded as a gunshot was fired into our classroom. It was impossibly loud. Entirely too close. There wasn't any crack. It sending shockwaves through my ribs, rattling my skull. Another shot followed by a muffled thud. Something heavy hit the floor. The thump was loud and wet, like someone dropping a watermelon at a barbecue. The air was different now. Wrong somehow. I smelled it before I saw it. The scent thick and metallic. Blood splattered on pink pencil cases. Another gunshot. A desk splintered apart as my ears rang from the gunfire. Boots moving through the chaos, stepping over something, someone. It was then that I saw him. He was tall, dressed in black, his face obscured by a mask. His rifle swept the room, passing over desks, cabinets, and the bodies, looking and choosing. I couldn't breathe. There was something about his eyes and his build. I recognized him. His head turned, his eyes staring directly into mine. Alan's fingers dug into my skin. I don't know how long we stayed there. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. Everything felt like moving through molasses, stuck in a slow, agonizing seconds between death and survival. Alan was up against my side, his chest rising and falling too fast, his fingers clenched around something small, something metal. I pressed harder against Alan, like I could disappear, like we could sink into the cabinets and no one would ever find us, like we could not exist for the next few minutes, like that someone would save us. A sound came from down the hall, distant but distinct. The sudden slam of a door being flung open and the echo bouncing down the empty corridor. The gunman moved towards it and paused. He turned back towards me, one eyelid closing slowly as he winked at me. Then he stepped out and slipped into the hallway like he had never been there at all. The door closed behind him and he was gone. For a long time, no one moved. Slowly came in the first breath, followed by the first whisper, and then the first choked sob. I lifted my head, hands trembling, my whole body shaking so hard I thought my ribs would crack from it. Alan moved first, untangling himself from me. I should have looked away, should have known better, but I didn't. I looked up, and I saw Mr. Corbin. His body twisted and wrong, his limbs tangled like a marionette with its strings cut, his chest unearthly still, his blood painted the floor beneath him in dark, spreading ribbons, and then my stomach lurched, and I turned, and I buried my face into Alan's shoulder because I couldn't look at it anymore. I couldn't. Somewhere outside, sirens screamed their long, lonely wail. I don't remember much after that. One moment I was under the table, my fingers clutching Alan's shirt. The next we were outside in the chaos of the schoolyard, surrounded by sirens, flashing lights, and teachers sobbing onto their hands. I clung to Alan, or maybe he clung to me. I wasn't sure anymore. Kevin sat on the curb, hands shaking like leaves in the wind, staring at nothing. Don was next to him, his head buried in his arms. Mac was standing alone. His back is rigid and as straight as a board. His face filled with an odd, uncharacteristic blankness, like a chalkboard wiped clean. I followed this glossy-eyed glaze, past the police, past the paramedics, to the stretchers lined up in the parking lot, to the covered bodies and the blood-stained sheets. Lying beneath one of the stretchers, stained crimson, laid a hand, small and delicate. Fingers he had held, fingers that he would never move again. Morgan. Mac made a sound I will never forget, raw and broken, and I knew part of him had just died. Wow. Wow. Damn. Okay, I kind of got into it at that end there. Okay guys, that's act 1 of 5. We're gonna stop the video there. This is a long recording. It's gonna be like about 3 hours almost. I'll catch you guys later, okay?